We're off and running on the big show Thursday night, 6:30. Well, 6:41, but who's counting, right? Welcome to what I call the big show. Jessie, Naylor, Vish, Kumaran, and yours truly, Larry Krueger on the Krueg Show. Brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in Northern California, New York style sausage company, Marin Auto Glass, and we've got the new sponsor. The new sponsor, which we just got this week, Underdog. We've also added 3 other sponsors that we're going to debut later on this month. But thank you to all of our sponsors, our old sponsors, our new sponsors, and the people who are out there who are like, Krug, I'm a potential sponsor. Well, thanks to all of you. But yeah, check out our new sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Click the link in the description. You can sign up by using the promo code Krueg, K-R-U-E-G, and they'll match your first deposit up to 100 bones. That's right. We'll be using Underdog Fantasy every week this football season to do fantasy tournaments with our listeners. And shout out to Kev Krueger for negotiating the arrangement.
Wow.
All right. And, of course, the first chat from the Krueg Show. Hit the like button early. Let's pump up the stream. Should be a fun one tonight. There's no doubt. This is my favorite stream of the week. I call this one the big show because, you know, there's an awful lot of people that want to hear from Jessie and Vish and myself. And we've been doing this now 5 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. We've gone around the horn here a few times, or at least once and then some. This is my second one hosting. But we move it to a different channel. 1 week it's on Jessie's channel. 1 week it's on Vish's channel. Last week it was on Vish's channel. The week before on Jessie's channel. This week it's on the Krueg Show. Next week back to Jessie between as we get ready for Niners Steelers. Guys, good to see you. How are you guys doing? I like the hat, Jessie. Very sharp.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. I am ready to roll. There's a lot to talk about, and we are just over a week away from the NFL season. I cannot wait.
Seriously. Vish, how you been? The background is downright busy compared to normal.
I'm back home right now, Labor Day weekend. I came home to my parents' house Tuesday night, enjoying my mom's cooking, as somebody put in the chat. And yeah, we painted the room too when I moved out. Like, my parents wanted to add some color. I guess I was the one that was against color for all this time. And noticing by the last 2 places I've lived, they might have a point there. But look at that blue. Look at that blue, Krug.
Yeah, well, your camera doesn't make it look like there's any color at all. It's just stark white, the whole thing.
Take my word for it. How about that? There's a beautiful contrast.
Is that a white shirt? Is your hair white? I'm confused.
Okay. Let's chill with it. But there's a divot. My room has this beautiful thing where my ceiling has a divot. And
it's called a tray. It's called a tray ceiling. Tray.
I see a tray ceiling, and the ceiling has a beautiful.
I've watched
contrast.
I've watched my HGTV. I know a tray ceiling when I see one.
So
I always love the
decor.
I always love the when they're walking from house to house in those like little those housing, whatever you call it, HGTV. Oh, double sinks. Now you have a sink and I have a sink. Like, that's the world's biggest fucking problem, is that you don't have dual sinks. I don't think I've ever lived in a place with 2 fucking sinks in one bathroom. And you know what? I've made it to this point. I don't know how. Somehow, some way, my wife and I have shared a sink.
I tell you something wild. My one-bedroom apartment in the city has 2 sinks.
2 sinks.
And I switch off every day. One day I brush my teeth in the left one. I wash my face in the left one. All of that. The other day I go to the right one. It's an awful convenience.
Yes. It's amazing what 2 sinks will do for you. We should also not be insensitive because, yes, I'm living out here on the West Coast where it's warm and we never have any real weather issues. Vish is in the middle of Chicago where, it's probably pretty sweaty. But Jessie's actually in Florida. And Jessie, there has been, I saw that you're doing some stuff to try to raise maybe some money. And is it hurricanes that are rolling through? Are we in the midst of hurricane season? And it sounded like you were not directly hit, but people maybe that were. Tell us before we get rolling here, what's going on in Florida right now weather-wise.
Yeah, man, there was a major hurricane that came through. Tampa is interesting. I don't know if it's just the way that it's shaped, but There hasn't been a direct hit on Tampa in over 100 years. Last
Wow.
year, there was one that was very close to hitting us. Literally at the very last minute, it shifted south and devastated everything below us. And then this year, there was one that was headed right at us again, and then it shifted north at the last minute and then went up into the Panhandle. It was a major hurricane as well. And so usually when these things happen, I did it for Hawaii as well. I'll wait, another week or so until all the information comes out on where to donate, and then I'll do a live stream, and all the money goes directly to, whatever it is that we decide to donate to. It's nice. Google, as YouTube, as takes money off the top of everything that you do. But when you add a donation to your stream, if people go directly to the donation, so don't donate to me, but if you go directly to the donation, they take zero money out of it, which is fantastic. It goes directly to the cause that you're donating to.
Very cool. And of course, it's, to think, I mean, everybody, there's a lot of stress in the world, but man, your home base is usually your salvation, your safe place, right? And when you hear these stories, and it's the unthinkable. I mean, I've lived in California my whole life, but you see, hurricanes roll through, tornadoes roll through, whether you're talking about, Moore, Oklahoma, or, the Panhandle there, and you see those terrible, the terrible tornadoes that ravage these towns and just basically rip the buildings out of the ground, and everything's flying around, and you're sitting there going, wow, how do these people pick up and move on and live a life and still have, family and kids and all the different stresses and all the things going on, and then deal with the fact that, their business is destroyed, their home is destroyed, and all in the blink of an eye, relatively. So, anyway, our thoughts and prayers go out to anybody affected by any natural disasters across this country. We, of course, are in the toy department of life over here, so we make the always awkward transition back to Niners and quarterbacks and Steelers and stuff that really matters. But that's kind of our lane, and we'll stay in it, appropriately. Guys, there's a lot to talk about with the 49ers. I didn't go to practice today, but I did have Joe Montana, the original greatest quarterback of all time, was on 95.7 The Game this morning on the I almost said KMBR, on the 95.7 The Game morning show with myself and Alan Stiles. And we talked a little bit about Trey Lance and a little bit about Brock Purdy, and he said he was not surprised that Trey Lance was traded, and he felt like Brock was a great fit for this offense. But let's talk a little bit about the presser earlier this week, where we debated weird versus unique. Mayoko had a question. I think it was Kawakami that had a question, and then all of a sudden Kyle went into his quarterback, dissertation about, well, what's happened to this point? First the dinosaurs came and they got big and fat and died, and then he started with what their original plan was in 2017 and the decisions they've made at quarterback. And I'd like to get into that a little bit, because off the rip, just because I think that there's a lot of cheap shot artists out there, and there's a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking. And I think as we get further and further removed from the beginning of this regime, people start kind of rewriting history, and it becomes like urban legend when there's really a lot more going on. And I guess I would ask you guys this: what do you view as Kyle's biggest quarterback mistake during his tenure, or Kyle and John, since they're really tied together? What is the current regime's biggest quarterback mistake since they've run the franchise in your mind? What's the one that you would say, because a lot of people want to go, oh, they've botched the quarterback thing. Man, they have screwed it to high heaven and blah, 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 blah. And I think it's one of those things, if you say it enough times, you start believing it. But if you really dig deep, I think we should here, we do a little autopsy on what they've done. I don't know that they're people should be quite as critical as they've been of this regime in their handling of the quarterbacks. Just to review for those who haven't checked in, they passed on Mahomes and Watson for Solomon Thomas in 2017, with an eye on Kirk Cousins, right, his potential free agency. And then later in that first year, they traded a second-round pick to New England for Jimmy Garoppolo. They couldn't foresee that him becoming available, but he came available, and they got him for a price that they felt was a steal. They moved a second for Jimmy G. Then they go with Jimmy G. He plays really well. He gets hurt. They go to the Super Bowl with Jimmy G. They lose the Super Bowl with Jimmy G. They had an opportunity to go for Tom Brady, who I believe was 42, maybe 43, and they decided to stay with Garoppolo, who I believe was 29 at that point, coming off of a Super Bowl appearance. Then they moved off of Garoppolo later on for a young opportunity in the draft. They ultimately drafted Trey Lance over Mac Jones and Justin Fields. There was a lot of talk that that Shanahan preferred Jones. Then they signed this Sam Darnold and Brandon Allen this offseason. Now they've traded Trey Lance to Dallas. They're going with Brock Purdy as their number one quarterback. Honestly, guys, what would you guys have done differently than they have done at the quarterback spot? Why don't we start the discussion right there?
Go ahead, Vish.
Yeah. I think there's really two decisions. The first decision is saying no to Brady at the first inflection point that you felt like Garoppolo wasn't good enough. At that point, they had a low cut cost on Garoppolo's contract. I think the out was like April 1st or end of May. So there was plenty of time to make that decision over the course of the offseason and still be financially stable with your team. Now, you kind of understand why they wouldn't want to break up a team after their quarterback took them to the Super Bowl. But the fact that they flirted with the idea of going off of him and then didn't move off of him, I think that's when the weirdness, quote unquote, starts with this situation. I think the quote unquote weirdness hovering around the 49ers quarterback situation also has to do with all the rumors in all the different quarterbacks that they tried to get without ultimately getting them. And I think that led to the weirdness as well. And that leads to the second inflection point, which is in 2021, when they ultimately made the decision that they didn't want Garoppolo to be part of the team in the long term. Now, Garoppolo ended up staying on 2 extra years, but to me, that was an inflection point where you had to understand how connected your team was to that specific quarterback, and you could not go get a young quarterback. You needed a veteran quarterback that had the credibility to walk into this locker room day one and tell everybody, hey, I know you love Jimmy G, but watch me throw it in practice. I'm just better than Jimmy G. And that's where I was obsessed with you could say obsessed. I was a little obsessed with the Matthew Stafford idea. And for me, the veteran quarterback made more sense at the time. It still does with then. I know, Krug, you asked for 1. I gave you 2. To me, there's 2 mistakes right there year after year. The first one is not replacing the first one is not doing the Garoppolo Brady thing. And then the second one is not immediately replacing Garoppolo with a veteran quarterback when you'd already decided a year ago pretty much that this wasn't going to work anymore for you.
Those are interesting. Only pushback I would have on the Brady one was, you know what, Tom Brady, I mean, we see now what it became, but I think from age, 39 on, you're always thinking, this guy's ancient. This is probably his last year because quarterbacks just don't play to 45. But he just did, and we didn't really see a dramatic decline, I thought, until maybe the final year.
I would
Brady.
say there was an uptick in Tampa, right? I would say there was definitely an uptick of him going to Tampa. But even he
played well in his 40s.
Even his 2019 season where he played poorly relative to how he has played at other points in his career, he was just flat out better than Garoppolo. He's bigger than Garoppolo. He moves better in the
Tom
pocket
Brady
than Garoppolo, and he throws it better than Garoppolo.
Yeah.
So, yeah, to me, there was no question even then at that point.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, they did bypass on Brady, but Brady, I think, was 42 or 43. But who knew that he was going to go to 45 and play really well? And then I can see kind of now looking back at the draft with Jones and Fields that they probably felt the same way you felt, Vish, like, hey, we need a veteran quarterback that can step in and play right away. And that's probably why they wanted Mac Jones, because he probably looked at Mac Jones as Jimmy Garoppolo minus the 20 mil and said, we could have basically a Jimmy Garoppolo-like quarterback, which is fine. But then we could just have a cheap guy on a rookie contract. And so if you said, why did Kyle want Mac Jones if he did, it was probably because he saw, that he could have his cake and eat it too. He could have a veteran-like quarterback who's ready to play, but also have a cheap guy that would enable him to keep the roster together. Jessie, what do you view as the biggest Kyle and John quarterback mistake?
I'm going to go with the very first mistake that I believe they made. And it wasn't that they didn't scout Patrick Mahomes. I don't know that Patrick Mahomes would have worked with Shanahan, knowing everything that we know now. But for me, the 49ers, deviated from your own original plan, which was Kirk Cousins. It took about 8 weeks for you to do so. And I think when you have a plan set in place that allowed you to not really look at Watson or Mahomes, then you've got to stick with that plan. Kyle Shanahan talked about how he was basically depressed when they got Jimmy Garoppolo because it wasn't Kirk Cousins. That's a very well-known story at this point. And I think that decision, coupled with paying Jimmy Garoppolo, who then got injured, really, I don't think that Kyle and Jimmy ever fully clicked either because it wasn't Kyle's guy. I think that was the original mistake. That was the one that led to everything else kind of going wrong down the stretch. I mean, you had a chance at Tom Brady, yes, but you probably would have never looked at Brady if you had Kirk Cousins. It would have never been a topic of conversation. You probably wouldn't look to draft Trey Lance if you had Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins may not be the greatest quarterback in the world, but he's certainly better than Jimmy Garoppolo. He's certainly healthier than Jimmy Garoppolo, and he certainly is much more what Kyle Shanahan is looking for than one Jimmy Garoppolo has ever been. And I think that mistake right there has kind of snowballed and turned into all these other ancillary mistakes along the way.
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
The one thing I would say, and the reason I didn't go with 2017, because I agree, not sticking with their plan at that point, even I think showed, one, that they're flexible, which is a positive, but two, that they're never fully tied into any plan, which sometimes can be detrimental. The one thing I will say is that if we go back to 2017 and say they get Cousins at that point, the roster that they ultimately ended up building, I'm not sure that it would have been able to be built out the same way once they added Cousins' contract, and that Cousins wouldn't have gotten injured, which meant that they would have been better in 2018, and we know how good Nick Bosa is. So the reason I go to Brady is because in some ways I think they kind of got lucky that Cousins wasn't there. They didn't get lucky that Garoppolo got hurt, but they got lucky that they got Nick Bosa from Garoppolo getting hurt. And they had this really, really good team, and they'd already built it. And Brady wasn't going to make them lose anybody. Like, the team was going to be just as good, except you basically replace Jimmy G with Tom Brady. And that's where I agree with you, Jesse, that 2017 was a mistake. But when I revisionist and look back 2020 hindsight at the last 7 years, I actually think that that mistake was somewhat lucky in a sense. And then the real mistake happened when you say no to Brady, because now you've built this amazing team over the last 3 years using, a variety of resources, and you could have added Tom Brady.
Yeah, I think in that draft, ultimately Bosa happened because Jimmy Garoppolo got injured. I understand that. And I also think there's a possibility that Kirk Cousins wouldn't have signed. Maybe the 49ers weren't willing to give him the guarantees. But even if that was the case, then you had an abundance of talented quarterbacks coming out in 2018, one of them being Sam Darnold, who obviously Shanahan is smitten with. He thinks he's the next Steve Young, but he's also talked pretty openly about how much he loved Josh Allen. And Josh Allen is a big reason that Trey Lance is here, I believe, in the way that he kind of fell in love with Josh Allen. So those guys were in that draft. Yeah, they had a chance. So to me, even if you didn't get Kirk Cousins, you would have been able to then take a rookie quarterback that year. You would have been, they would have been awful. They would have been probably the first pick in the NFL, if not the second. They really would have had their choice of any of the quarterbacks. They wouldn't have had to move up. They wouldn't have had to put a lot of capital in it. And they really could have just sat there and scouted them. Exactly. Yep.
It's so funny. I when I came up with this topic, I really thought you guys were not going to go in that direction. You guys both really surprised me with your answers. And I think I'm going to surprise you with mine. But the one that I thought you guys were going to say, do you want to guess? I think you guys probably know.
Not playing Trey Lance year one?
No, well, that I didn't even think about that. I was actually thinking about the original mistake, which was to pass on Mahomes and Watson in that 2017 draft for Solomon Thomas, which I think in a lot of ways impacted a lot of things, right? Because if you don't draft Solly Thomas, then and he doesn't bust, then maybe you're not drafting Kinlaw a couple years later, and you're not, spending lots and lots and lots of picks on your defensive line, and you have your quarterback. You have a young quarterback that fits your timeline for roster development, because the Niners went 7-20, or they went 7-25 the 2 years before Shanahan arrived, but they also struggled in the first 2 years of the Shanahan era, 17-18, right? Or was it 17-18. And they could have had a young Mahomes or a young Watson. But when you look a little closer at exactly, and I think most people would say, oh, they passed on Mahomes. I mean, my God, they passed on Mahomes. When you go back to that, Lynch and Shanahan were hired in late January, early February of 2017, like first week in February, basically a week before the combine. They were already at that point, the day they walked in the door and were uniting as this tandem regime running the Niners, they were already 7 months behind, the draft prep. Draft prep starts tonight. Utah and Florida are going right now. John Lynch has a 49er scout in Logan watching Florida and Utah, which I took Florida. I shouldn't have taken Florida. But I took the Gators tonight. But I'm saying they were 7 months late in the draft prep. They had missed the entire draft, the entire regular season. They had missed the entire bowl season. They were literally just days before the combine. And so they were already in kind of the final stretches of the preparation. They hadn't even talked to their scouts yet. They didn't even know who their scouts were. And so they opted to kind of punt on a highly volatile, decision, which is picking a quarterback in the first round and go in a different direction with an eye on Cousins. But I think a lot of people have revisionist history about Mahomes. Mahomes, was 13-16, guys, at Texas Tech, and he went 10th. And man, if you look, he was awesome there. Texas Tech was not sub 500 because of Mahomes. Their defenses were ranked 126, 125, and 128 in total defense, nationally, and that's why they were sub 500. But if you go back since 1996, there's been about a dozen quarterbacks that went in the first 2 rounds of the draft that, that basically, that came from the same kind of background. And only Jay Cutler really, had any kind of success with Denver and Chicago.
What do you mean by the background?
Well, I should say the losing records. Since 96, if you take, there's a dozen quarterbacks that went with a losing record that went in the first 2 rounds of the draft. And of those dozen quarterbacks, only Cutler was even decent. And then the other thing that I think is kind of a little bit revisionist history is, Mahomes did play he put up massive numbers. But he also played in that air raid, which the late Mike Leach, was a big part of his offense. He was a big proponent of the air raid. And the air raid quarterbacks, RIP Mike Leach, the Pirate, he was a great guy. But the air raid quarterbacks track record sucks. Do we need to review Josh Heupel, Graham Harrell, Case Keenum, Kevin Cobb, Tim Couch, Davis Webb, RG3, Jimmy G, Cliff Kingsbury, Sam Bradford, Jared Goff at Cal, Brandon Whedon, Johnny Manziel, Geno Smith,
Baker,
Nick Foles, John Beck, if you want to go back far enough. Those guys were all the air raid guys, and they all sucked for the most part. Goff was the best of them, basically, but basically all those guys were no good. So you had a sub 500 quarterback playing at Texas Tech who had great gaudy numbers in a wide open Big 12 running the air raid, which there hadn't been a lot of success from anybody who had run the air raid. And it wasn't like he went first; he went 10th. Kansas City traded up. John Dorsey and Andy Reid. They had a somewhat of a vision, I guess. Somebody had a vision. Somebody pounded the table. But I'm just saying the Mahomes thing. It's easy to kind of point to Mahomes and say, "Oh, they should have drafted Mahomes," but it was a much more difficult evaluation at the time. That's my whole point.
I think, Larry, I think a lot of people criticize them because Shanahan openly admitted that they didn't
scout
into it. And that's where, when you have the second pick in the draft, it's your responsibility. He talked about it actually in a presser today when he talked about how them having the 12th pick and picking that close, they felt like they had to look at quarterback because they were picking that high in the draft. It's the same responsibility when you have the second pick in the draft. And I do think there is a little bit of revisionist history with Mahomes the other way, because I think a lot of people remember draft time based on how Mel Kiper projects prospects on ESPN. And that's a way to remember it. But if Mel Kiper tells you a guy's a second-round pick, then you remember that guy not having draft hype. And when he tells you Matt Barkley is the best quarterback in the draft for 7 months and Matt Barkley goes in the 4th round, nobody really cares. Like, hey, Mel, you told us Matt Barkley was really good. Matt Barkley was never a first-round quarterback. And that's where with Mahomes, his draft stock was low when the scouts and the public media evaluators were in on the draft process, but it increased. He was the fastest rising prospect later in that draft when the coaches got involved in the process. And I remember it was reported before that draft that Sean Payton was going to take him at 11. I think that's been pretty much admitted. That's why the Chiefs traded up to 10. And Bruce Arians was a huge fan of him. So he was going in the top 15 picks of a draft. When you look back on it, when you look at Leonard Fournette, Christian McCaffrey, Myles Garrett, Solomon Thomas, Jamal Adams, Malik Hooker, Marshawn Lattimore, like it was a stacked non-quarterback draft, and people were valuing that quarterback as a top 10 pick. To me, like, hey, sure, Mahomes wasn't the most hyped draft prospect ever, but he also was clearly something that people saw something because he went in the first 10 picks in the draft. He didn't go in the 2nd round or the 3rd round. Like, somebody traded up for him within the first 10 picks and took him.
I hear you. All I'm saying is, I mean, if you had a buddy, let's say, who was going to take the bar exam and try to become a lawyer, and he was 7 months behind everybody else in studying for that test,
is absolutely right.
Wouldn't you say, hey, man, I think I'd punt on this go-around and maybe get ready the next go-around? And I think that was their approach. I mean, we can definitely question it now because it didn't work out. And Mahomes is Mahomes. Mahomes is the quarterback of his generation, and they had an opportunity to draft him. They had the pick, and they just didn't do it, and they voluntarily didn't do it. But I would say this. Oh, go ahead, Jesse.
I was just going to say this kind of to rebuttal against what Vish was saying earlier. You know, my whole point was the Kirk Cousins thing, and the talent would have definitely been different. But imagine if they had gotten Kirk Cousins and had, let's say, the 2nd pick in the draft. They either could have traded back and recuperated a bunch of picks, or maybe they draft a Quentin Nelson or a Saquon Barkley or a Denzel Ward, right? And so the talent is different, but I still think that the talent is potentially there.
That's a good point.
Okay, so to me, I mean, I know I'm going to surprise you on this one. To me, if you said, what is Kyle's biggest quarterback mistake? It's easy to point to Mahomes, but I'm going to give him a pass because of the timeline on it. Trading the 2nd for Garoppolo was a no-brainer. No-brainer. I absolutely would have done that. Bypassing Brady for Garoppolo is not something I would have done. In fact, I was on the radio at that point advocating, get off of Garoppolo, go after Brady. I wanted to see Tom come home. But it's fair to say that when a guy's 42 and the other guy that you're getting off of is 29 and you just went to a Super Bowl with that 29-year-old and your locker room's kind of wed to your 29-year-old guy, that would have been a foundation-altering type decision and a lot of question marks into what does Brady really have left? Maybe he's done, because I think it's reasonable to expect anybody who's 42 in pro sports to be done. So even though I would have gone with Brady, I can't totally fault them for not, because nobody had a crystal ball that said that Brady was going to win a Super Bowl in Tampa and he was going to go play 3 more good years. And then moving off of Garoppolo for a young quarterback, I think is simply an exercise of look at our team with him at $25 million. Look at our team without him with a quarterback on a rookie deal. Oh, yeah, let's move without him because he's kind of a flawed guy anyway. So I don't really question that one. And then drafting Trey Lance over Mac Jones and Justin Fields, I advocated for that, and I felt like I did the deepest of deep dives on all those quarterbacks. So I'm not going to pretend that I wasn't a Trey Lance fan now. To me, the biggest issue that I have with Kyle quarterback decision-making is the latest move, signing Sam Darnold and punting on Trey Lance. Wow. And I personally think that I don't think it's going to burn him like in week 1. I don't think it's going to burn him this year, but I do think it's going to burn him. And not because Darnold can't play, it's because I think they got off of Lance way, way, way too soon. They drafted this incredible talent at quarterback, and just because he was raw, they gave him 2 years. I mean, you heard Kyle say it. We went with a young quarterback. It didn't work out for 2 years. We moved on. Well, maybe your expectation should have been after a couple years that, this guy's unique. He's uniquely raw as well. And he may need more than 2 years. Many quarterbacks in history have. Steve Young didn't get it until he was 31. This guy's 23. I think in hindsight, we're sitting here on August 31st of 2023. But fast forward this thing 5 years, and I think we're going to look back and say, oh, man, the real bad decision was punting on Trey Lance for a fourth instead of just making him the third-string quarterback, staying the course, and letting the thing, letting him develop over time. I really kind of believe that he's going to get it in time. I know Niner fans are wanting at this point to turn the page on Lance, focus on Purdy in the season ahead. I get all that. And by the way, I think some of this criticism, tell me what you guys think of this, is kind of bull crap, because I really believe at the end of the day, what do you got? You still got Brock Purdy and a Super Bowl ready roster, and you're one of the second or third pick to win the Super Bowl. So I don't necessarily see the 49ers in a bad position currently, to be completely honest. They got a cheap quarterback that they can win with, and they've got a loaded roster, and they're one of the Super Bowl favorites. But if your premise is Kyle's botched the quarterback thing and you're going to analyze it intellectually, to me, I'm most upset about the trading of Lance and giving up on him before they find out exactly what his ceiling really is. That's where I'm at.
Jesse, go ahead.
What do you guys think? Do you think I'm already? Do you think I'm putting too much credibility in Lance's upside and not and ignoring his rawness and inability to be ready? 3 years in?
I don't think that you're putting too much thought into that. I agree. I think Lance definitely can develop into somebody really good. I've been pretty firm in that, but of all the things that they've done, I feel like that's the very, very last thing. There's so many things that had to happen, I think, wrong along the way that even allowed that to be in motion. So for me, when I look at the 5 or 6 things that happened before that, if any one of them would have changed, Lance would have never even been on this roster. They wouldn't have traded all those picks for him, and we wouldn't have even been in that situation. So for me, I'm trying to stop the situation from happening before it actually did. And that's why I went all the way back to the very first decision, because who knows how that would have played out. I'm sure that would have had its downfalls in certain areas as well. But what I do know is it would have changed everything that happened. The trajectory would have been completely different. And the trajectory that they have now, I'm not a fan of.
Yeah, I'm on the exact same page as Jesse there. And I think the other thing with the Lance thing is it's a cherry on top. And just as Jesse said, 7 different things needed to happen for Lance to get there. There's still a lot that needs to happen for Lance, for trading Lance for what they did to become a mistake, right? He's the third string quarterback in Dallas. He's in a new environment. He has to acclimate himself, then beat out Cooper Rush, then hope there's an issue with Dak's contract that gets him on the field. He plays really well. And then all of a sudden it's a big mistake for the Niners. And so because there's still a lot yet to happen with that, it's purely speculative to me at this point. You could end up being right ultimately, Krug, if we do a hindsight 5 years from now. But today, when we're doing the hindsight of the last 7 years, I can't go back there and say that was the biggest mistake at all.
Not everybody agrees. Christopher Leclerc, this might be the worst take Larry's ever had. Are you kidding me? I've had some really bad takes. This isn't even anywhere close. This isn't even in the top 10. I've got takes that are far worse than this. That's just how I feel. That's how I feel. And the one thing I do with these streams, when you have your own channel, you can kind of say what you think. And that's how I really believe. I really think that we nobody can predict the future. We don't know where it's going, but based on what I've seen, I think going to Darnold, who's kind of a proven, he implodes under pressure. Does he have a nice arm? Yeah, that's why he's always been a huge tease. That's why he went top 3. But he hasn't done it to this point, and now he'll be surrounded with a better cast, and there's lots of people tooting his horn, but I don't see it. I see a guy who's very inconsistent. Let's hit some supers, and we'll move topics here. Jorge Luis Sotelo says, greetings from the 305, gents. 305? Where's that? Is that where's 305? Is that Florida?
Isn't that Miami?
Okay, he says, I feel like I'm watching an all-star lineup of 49er content creators. Look at that. Who knew? We got this one from Scotty _Dippin. Instead of Scotty Pippen, Scotty Dippin. Krug's already spicy. Is he deloading this week? What is deloading? Are we just inventing words? Is that even a word?
That's what Brock Purdy's doing this week. He's deloading.
Deloading. That's the technical term.
He's deloading, or he's hurt and they're hiding it. Jorge Luis Sotelo. So much for my prediction that Trey Lance will be the starting quarterback when the Niners beat the Bengals in the Super Bowl 31-19. Yeah, I don't see that happening.
They can still beat the Bengals in the Super Bowl, though.
Yes, they could. Doesn't seem likely though. Twisted Clown. What did the Pack get for Aaron Rodgers? Could they want Trey? Well, Trey's gone. What did the Pack get for Aaron Rodgers? Couple number ones.
It was
it a 1 and a 2?
It was
one
a
and
first, and then in a conditional pick that could turn into a first.
Sonny Desai says, I'm really worried about the run defense. Amen. Let's get to that. Our rushing attack and the quarterback of our starters go down. Let's get Pig in a Pickle, a Michelin star.
Do you know what the Michelin Guide is, Krug?
No.
Oh, it's like the big restaurant rating
Oh,
system.
really?
Yeah, so a 3-star Michelin is the most prestigious honor that a restaurant can get. So the French Laundry, for example, is a 3-star Michelin restaurant run by Thomas Keller. I'm a big Food Network guy, Krug. You were talking about the decor shows and all of that. That might be your thing, but I'm killing it over there on the Food Network.
You know what? Some of those Food Channel things are really good. My favorite one is that Robert, whatever, the guy with the super big guns who goes into like failed restaurants and is like, you're screwing it up. And here's why. You got to change this and change that. You're fighting up front. You need to, have you seen that? It's called Restaurant Impossible.
I thought Ramsey does that. And then John Taffer has like a show that's based on that, but with like bars, like Bar Rescue, right?
I've seen the bar ones, yeah.
I love the one where it's like, hey, man, the guy who's running your front desk or your hostess is taking food out the back door, and they set up cameras, and they're like, what's this? What's this? You're buying food, you're giving it away. The guy's like, I don't know why I'm not making any money. Some of those are freaking awesome. Sonny Desai says, Pig in a Pickle is better. Greater than. I know my greater than, less than. Alligator mouth. Greater than French Laundry. There you go. And Niner Gold.
The French Laundry. I think
that's where
Tim Cavalcami. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They referred to it when they talk about it together. That's where all they eat together. One day we can join them.
By the way, tomorrow, if you want to do a meet and greet, I'll be going to Pig in a Pickle at 12:30 for lunch tomorrow in
with
Emeryville.
Ryan Hensley?
You know what? Ryan Hensley, we had
even on the bet.
Yeah, I owed him lunch, but then he owed me lunch, and together we don't eat lunch. Niner Gold says, was media aware that Purdy was on a pitch count? All right, let's get to that for a second. What do you make? Oh, by the way, and we got this one non-super, but it's worth reading. S Flood 2554. 5 minutes into the show, and already Larry has 2 F-bombs. Love to hear it. There you go. Somewhere above, my grandmother saying, he's got beautiful diction. I just wish he wouldn't swear so much. That's my grandmother used to say that when I was on the radio. She'd be like, I listen to every show, and I'm thinking to myself, my God, Grandma, I'm just like ripping people left and right. Are you really enjoying my show? And she's like, you have beautiful diction. I'm like, yeah, but are you listening to what I'm saying? And she's like, well, not so much, but you have wonderful diction. She's up there somewhere. Anyway, what do you make of the deloading of Brock Purdy this week? Is that something? Is it nothing? They're talking about, well, Brock's going to be freshened up for Pittsburgh. There was that film in the Charger game of a D lineman coming, number 90, I believe it was, coming eerily close to Brock's elbow on something that looked very Hassan Reddick NFC Championship game like, almost. I don't think there was contact there, but it's enough to make you, kind of sick to your stomach, even just seeing how close it was. And now Brock's not playing. He also banged knees with J.P. Mason on a run play, and he did some deep. I was at practice a couple days ago. He did some a number of deep knee bends, like he was trying to loosen up that knee. I wonder if he's got a bone bruise on the knee. What do you think? I mean, deloading. Is it something? Is it nothing? Are they covering up something? Is he hurt? Where are you guys on the deload?
I think for me, it's hard to tell.
Sounds kind of dirty, doesn't it?
Yeah, it definitely does. But for me, it's just hard to tell because the 49ers haven't necessarily been the most truthful when it comes to this position. I mean, we've caught them in a bunch of, I guess we can call them lies, however you want to go with that, but they haven't been truthful all the way through. And when they talked about Brock Purdy early on and how he would miss every third practice, nobody was alarmed when he missed the third practice because they set us up for that. And when they said he would come back mid-August and be at all the practices, that's exactly what happened. And so if they had just led everybody down the path of what the plan was, the plan that they said has been in place the whole time, if they would have let us know then it wouldn't be a big deal. But now, because you didn't let anybody know, maybe it is the plan and maybe it's not a big deal at all. But because you didn't tell anybody, people have room to speculate. And the fact that he just played his first couple games of the season and now he's deloading before the season starts, I think it gives people a little bit of reason for panic. I would say I'm not really in panic mode by any means. I'm more panic mode about Bosa right now than anything, or a damn kicker. But, when you're not open and honest about the situation and upfront with it, then this is what happens.
Yeah.
By the way, deload, here's the definition for those of you who like definitions. A deload is a short planned period of recovery where training volume and intensity are purposely reduced to promote recovery, injury prevention, and improve performance. A deload can last a week or be a complete break from training. So those of you who were wondering the definition of deload, you've now gotten it.
So it's like a taper down. It's like a
taper down.
Yeah. I honestly, Krueg, I don't know what to make of it. I'm going to waffle on this one because I want to see what happens next week. I honestly have no clue. I was on with Jack Hammer last week, and Jack Hammer was saying that they were doing this before, and nobody really noticed that his reps were cut down in warm-ups. So I'm not sure what's exactly happening. I'm just going to wait on next week and see what actually happens. I'm not worried yet, but obviously any situation with an athlete that's making somewhat miraculous recovery with how quick and how timely everything has been with his elbow, given when he got surgery and what he's going to do week one, which is be the starting quarterback of the 49ers. You can't help but not be a little bit worried if they say he's deloading or we're resting him or something like that, just because, yeah, a lot of the Niners season hinges on this guy remaining healthy.
Jimmy Kwan with the very insightful, too much spicy food from the taco truck, and I'll be deloading. There you go. Thank you for that, Jimmy, especially around dinner time. That was very appreciated. Feeling your joke here on the deloading. Okay, so Brock Purdy week one. I mean, how do you guys we've analyzed the quarterbacks to death. But how do you feel? We're on the doorstep to the regular season. How do you guys feel about going into this season with Brock Purdy as the number one guy? How do you feel he will play and fare in Pittsburgh? How do you just feel overall about what you've seen from Brock this summer? Jessie in camp, Vish in the preseason, and what kind of year do you envision him having?
Go ahead, Vish.
Yeah, I feel fine. I feel good, in fact. One, because he looks healthy, and that was always going to be the biggest question with him. How healthy is he going to be, and how confident is he going to be in his health, right? Not just returning to health, but returning to performance. Those two aren't always exactly the same thing, right? You can medically check every box that you're fully healthy, but are you the same player on the field? You have to go prove that on the field. And so far, he's looked all signs on track towards being that. I would say that seeing the 49ers over the course of preseason and all of that, I'm kind of pointed to a couple of things you have pointed out with their roster lacking depth in certain areas. So definitely I feel worse about their entirety of their football team compared to 2021 or 2022 in terms of how I look at their roster. But specific to a quarterback, I don't know that we've had a starting quarterback play that well in terms of when they've played in preseason, in terms of just being on rhythm and being on time. Now, it wasn't that he was asked to do anything. It's just that I'm comparing it to other preseason games with Garoppolo, for example, where it looks pretty ugly, right? Like the 0.0 pass rating versus Denver. The game against the Chiefs where he struggled against the Chiefs starters and their backups come in and he throws a nice pass to Richie James down the sideline, but it takes some time to get going. On Drift Stock, same play, he threw the touchdown to Richie James versus Tampa Bay week 1. But because we've seen that, we saw Trey Lance last year versus the Texans. Krueg, you and I streamed after that. I thought that one was a little bit ugly for Trey Lance too, in terms of an overall game. And so when we're comparing it up to that and we're looking at how Brock Purdy has looked individually in the preseason, yeah, I guess I feel good about him going forward.
Jesse, how do you feel about Brock at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about the quarterback room as a whole for just a second. One thing that the 49ers really tried to pump up all offseason is how strong this quarterback room was. And here we are about ready to go into week 1, and this quarterback room is not as strong as it was last year. So the quarterback room as a whole, I don't feel as good about is what we should have last year or what ended up happening last year. That being said, if Trey Lance was never here and never an option to be the second quarterback, I think a lot of people, myself included, would feel a lot better because Sam Darnold is not a guy that I want starting a lot of games. I do feel comfortable with him playing a game or two throughout the season if he has to. And I think as far as backup quarterbacks go, he's in the upper echelon of backup quarterbacks. There's maybe a few that are better than him. I think quarterback play across the NFL is really kind of overrated. There's not a lot of good quarterback play happening in the NFL, even from starters. And Brock Purdy, to me, is middle of the road. And I feel fine with that. I feel totally fine with that, especially knowing that he's going into year 2 and he can improve. Jimmy Garoppolo was a guy that was never going to improve. And although Trey Lance had a very high ceiling, his floor was lower than Brock's. There's no doubt about that. And, that was something that I look forward to with Trey Lance, is watching him improve throughout the season. I think we can see the same thing from Brock Purdy as well, especially not having a full off season to actually get better. A lot of it was just working through the arm surgery and getting that out of the way. So I expect to see him hit checkpoints and get better throughout the year. And I think that's something that we should look forward to.
Will he hit his landmarks? Like, come on.
He'll hit his landmarks. He might deload a couple weeks, but I think everything will be fine.
I could be deloading if he doesn't work out.
Also,
I'll say this: I haven't felt this confident and comfortable in a 49er quarterback in this century. I mean, you literally have to go back. I mean, I think of all the quarterbacks the Niners have had in the last 20 plus years, going back to the last century. I feel more confident with Brock than I felt with any of them. I mean, right on down the list: Garoppolo, Lance, Mullins, Beathard, you name it, Hoyer, Gabbert, Kaepernick, Alex, Troy Smith, Sean Hill, JT O'Sullivan.
Do you feel
Dilfer, Winky, Rattay, Dorsey, Pickett. I'm looking at the list. Jeff Garcia, Stenstrom. Literally, not since Steve Young have I felt this
more confident in a
quarterback
going into 2013, because I feel like that's got to be the
totally,
right?
Because
I felt more confident with Kaepernick.
Kaepernick always had a mercurial skill set. Don't get me wrong, but as far as this guy, I think as far as he sees it. He processes, the ball comes out of his hand quickly. I think he can protect himself from injuries because the ball does come out quickly. I love the combination of the processing, the accuracy, the touch, the timing. To me, it's like it goes. I mean, you got to go back to Steve Young. The last time the Niners had a quarterback that actually did all those things with consistency. I loved the upside of Kaepernick, and I was thrilled when they said, hey, we're going with Kaepernick and not Alex Smith. But looking back at it, there was a level of crudeness and rawness to his game. The ball did not always come out on time. I mean, to me, Kaepernick was super tough, super fast, rocket for an arm. There were so many great things about him that I loved, and I wanted Harbaugh to go to him. But as far as trustworthy and really processing and being consistent and being accurate and being on time, no, I don't think he's anywhere even close to Purdy. I think Steve Young is the last guy that actually processed, had great timing, was accurate, and did it with consistency. So I feel really good about where they're at quarterback-wise. But I'm a little bit nervous about the upcoming season for other reasons. And I kind of want to get your guys' thoughts on that. I think this quarterback ongoing, obsession that us as content creators, us as fans, us as media, whatever group you're in, have gone through this offseason have completely blinded us to the real issues that this team faces going into the season, which is, and I asked Shanahan about it yesterday, or was it 2 days ago? No, I guess it was yesterday. I said, hey, what's the deal? I mean, you guys just got gashed by Denver and the Chargers for 6.5 yards a carry. How big of a deal is your run defense or lack thereof? And he said, I didn't like the run D against the Raiders either. And he goes, if it was just based on the preseason, it's a real problem. But he said, like, hey, you know what? We were number one in the league last year against the run. We didn't defend the running quarterback well in the fourth quarter of the San Diego game, or the Charger game, talking about Duggan. He talked about the 75-yard run from Joshua Kelly, and he said, those numbers might be a little skewed, but you could tell that he doesn't like the fact that they haven't stopped the run worth a lick in the preseason, and he's just hoping upon hope that when the bullets start firing for real at Heinz Field a week from Sunday, that the real run D that was number one last year is going to resurface. But to me, he didn't sound real confident. So I'm nervous about that. I'm nervous about, the defensive end depth, which I think is putrid compared to what it was last year. And Kosaric is going to run those guys out there a bunch of snaps. And maybe even a little bit of the O-line depth. I mean, if they lose even one O-lineman, they could be in a jailbreak situation on their quarterback. So I think those three issues are major, primary, kind of, could get you beat and eliminate you from the Super Bowl conversation kinds of issues. And we're not talking about any of them because we're so busy talking about Trey this and Sam that and Brandon this and Purdy that. I think it's hid the real issue. Give me your guys' thoughts on that.
It's definitely hit it. Yeah,
and
go ahead.
One
Vish.
more. Go ahead, Jesse. I just want to add one more to it. I think this entire cornerback situation that they have now, I said Diamador Lenore is the best nickel on this team. I said it on the Krueg show. I just want to pat myself on the back, but he's going to play nickel, right? But I think
you're right.
If he plays nickel, now they have an open spot on the other side of Mooney Ward. And I don't know that we really saw a guy establish himself through this training camp or preseason as, hey, he's going to be the guy at corner. So I think there is one more question in there before Jesse goes as well. And that's, hey, they're not going to have either they have a nickel spot question mark or they have a question mark on outside corner on the other side of Mooney Ward.
Yeah, I think this is the first year in a long time that the offense might have to carry the team, especially early on. I mean, Wilkes is new to the team. He hasn't even been acclimated with Bosa. Bosa is obviously going to come in and be great probably immediately. I'm not worried about Bosa necessarily, but I think there's a lot that needs to be kind of picked up on and learned. And a new nickel corner is one of them. A new edge opposite of Bosa is another. The depth is a question mark. There's definitely a lot of glaring weaknesses that we're starting to see, or potential glaring weaknesses that we're starting to see now that the quarterback situation has changed. I think they've always been there. I think we've always kind of known about it, but most people wanted to hear about and talk about the quarterback situation. And I also think this is where people are now getting a little bit flustered with Kyle potentially in the way that maybe the roster has been neglected over the last couple of years in some of these areas. A lot of it due to the picks that they lost going after Trey Lance and CMC. And the quarterback situation has kind of insulated Kyle, I think, for a couple years from criticism. And now that it's been removed, everything is kind of out in the open, and people are frustrated with kind of the way that some of the things have been handled. But we'll see. I mean, it's definitely a big deal. But I mean, you guys tell me your opinion. I think that this might be an offensive team more than a defensive team for the first time in a long time. I don't know
eager
if
to
that's a
see.
hot take or what, but
No, I think you could be onto something. I hope you're wrong, but you could be onto something. I mean, they've got a lot of talent, individual talent, all throughout the defense, but doesn't mean they're going to collectively play at a really high level. I'm really eager to see that if they don't, how does Steve Wilks react? Because D'Amico was sunshine. He would go to the presser and people would have criticism, and he'd be like, "Oh, I really hadn't even thought of that." I mean, he was like so positive, and he never took on his players. Wilks gives you that vibe, and I was on the radio today, so I missed out on going down to his presser. But one of the questions I want to ask Steve, and I feel like he's such a straight shooter, he might give me a straight answer, is if this thing starts coming apart defensively, how's he going to react? Because he seems like the kind of guy that wears his emotions on his sleeve, and he's critical. I mean, he steps up, he calls it the way it is, and he may rankle some feathers and upset some players with his public reaction to their struggles. I mean, I don't get the sense that he's going to be like, buttering everybody's muffin all year. I think he's the kind of guy that's going to go to the presser and say, yeah, that's what happened, and this guy needs to step up. And that's going to be a dramatic departure from what D'Amico's tone was as the DC. So I'm kind of eager to see like what they look like defensively, and then what if he starts ripping them, what's their reaction to him? Because the one thing about Steve that is really interesting, he's very capable, he's a really talented coach, and he's been like somewhere new almost every single year of his career. And he doesn't sound like the kind of guy who covers anybody's backside. He seems like the kind of guy that like speaks the truth. And sometimes you got to move when you're hitting that hard. And I'm wondering if he hits hard and then wears out his welcome, and the guys stop playing for him because he's so direct. I don't know. It's something to look for.
What do you make of him buffering, or excuse me, to use what you said, buttering the muffin of Isaiah Oliver, though, right? Like, he was asked directly about that one, and that was like his first opportunity this offseason, because even Shanahan has seen it. Shanahan told us, he's like, yeah, no, this guy has not earned it. Like, he's not playing too well. We can all see it. And Wilks was like, no, that's my guy. He looks good, all that. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing. And
he also said he had a Rolodex of nickels.
Right. And I'm doing a very poor mimicry of his voice. But just specific to that topic, do you think that might have given us an inkling of how he's going to deal with adversity? Because Oliver was signed for a lot of money, and he was not signed for a lot of money to be playing in the fourth quarter of preseason game number 3. I'll tell you that.
It's a great question, Vish. I don't know how he's going to react. I didn't hear him today. I'm shooting to the bottom of the supers here, but Josh Dowling says Wilks basically blamed the linebackers for the poor run defense. And maybe the linebackers are to blame. I mean, there's no question that Graham on the Joshua Kelly run, he got caught inside. And when you go with, I was all about D. Winters, Jalen Graham, go with the youth, pass on the vets. But when you do that, you get, sometimes inconsistent run fits and blown plays and easy touchdowns. And we kind of already saw that. So maybe, be careful what you wish for, kind of a thing.
But I think he's kind of calling out the obvious there. I mean, Warner, that's never been Warner's strength. Linebackers are lighter in the league than they've ever been. And Fred Warner's strength is in coverage, pass defense, maybe even blitzing or showing the blitz, getting the defense lined up. I would say if he has one area of opportunity, it's filling the gaps in the run game. I mean, there's a lot of times where he meets a running back and he's the one that gets blown up. That is not his strength. I know that he jumps around and has the Quan Alexander vibe, and you would think that translates into him being a heavy hitter, but that is not who he is. No. Greenlaw's a heavy hitter, but Fred Warner, I mean, if he's in a situation where offensive linemen are getting to him this season, I think that's going to be really, really bad. And the defense is going to give up a ton of rushing yards in a scenario like that.
So I agree with the last part of what you said. I actually disagree with the first part. I think he's fine. in terms of fitting the run, I think you are right, though. He's not old school linebacker like what New England used to have with like Brandon Spikes and Dante Hightower, where pulling guards would come around and they would crack them when they would come
Right.
around and just screw up the run, right? Like that's not what they do. But specific to what Krug's talking about, the Jalen Graham play, right? That was opened up and it's you got to fill the A gap and you got to go. Like it's right there in front of you. He got caught inside. It's him in the back, one-on-one at the A gap. You got to come make the play. And he didn't. And then the post safety was nowhere to be found to come crack him at like 12 yards. I don't know what happened there. And so it's like a very, very, I think it's a little bit different situation specifically when you're blaming the linebackers for that one. Cause like, okay, that one specifically, Graham missed the fit and like perhaps that's happened. But I also think there's been issues with how they're fitting in general. Like I've seen stuff where they are, and I have to go back. I've not done a lot of preseason in-depth watching. This is on TV, but you see stuff where they're pulling stunts and they're blitzing guys away from where the run is and stuff like that. And they're just straight up getting gashed too. And so I don't know if maybe the game planning will help and all of that, but I do know that Steve Wilkes was the coordinator in Cleveland a couple years ago. Now, Cleveland didn't have the interior defensive talent that the 49ers have, like a Javon Hargrave or an Eric Armstead. They were definitely smaller on the inside, but they also struggled.
Can you guys tell me your opinion? People in the chat think I'm off my rocker. They think Fred Warner is a heavy hitting linebacker. Greenlaw, to me, it's Greenlaw and it's Hufanga. Those are your actual tone setters when it comes to laying people out. Fred Warner, I'm not saying he doesn't clean people up, but if he gets one-on-one with a big back, he's usually on the losing end of that. He is not. I don't think he's a heavy hitter at all.
I don't think he's. He was a grab and drag rover backs combo safety backer at BYU.
It's not a knock, but he's not a heavy hitter.
Yeah, he's a great player, but I mean the game's a passing game, and he's a guy who's maybe the NFL's best coverage linebacker.
Yes,
he's not
1,000%.
I mean, it's not like Jesse's calling him a wuss. I mean, come on, everybody needs to,
he doesn't. But he doesn't crack people either. Jesse's absolutely right.
He's not old school Pepper Johnson. I mean, he's not a thumper. If anything,
I didn't say he's not a good tackler. See, this is where people are getting confused. Now they're saying I'm saying he's not a good tackler. I never once said that. That didn't come out of my mouth. I said he's not a heavy hitter. There's a difference.
Yeah. I don't think that's debatable, by the way.
He's a speed-oriented player who I think has been covered up by some of the better, interior guys. And why don't we get to that? Because to me, when I'm looking at, I was doing an interview the other day with Jody Mack from who's on WIP in Philly, CBS Sports Radio, WFAN in New York, old buddy of mine, radio guy. And
all right, Krug.
I love him. I love Jody Mack. I'm a Jody Mack guy, and we were talking Hargrave. And I was mentioning how the Niner run D is kind of a sieve. And he said, well, Javon Hargrave was a great pass rusher here, but he really wasn't much of a run defender, and the numbers kind of showed it. Look at the Niner front. They don't have a DJ Jones. They don't. Givens, one-gap penetrator. Kalia Davis, one-gap penetrator. Javon Hargrave, maybe the best one-gap penetrator in the game. Armstead is really functionally strong. He's solid against the run. But you're still talking about a 6'7" guy with long legs, long arms. Kinlaw is supposed to be a thumper inside. He's supposed to be the guy that absorbs blocks. But, we've seen him get kicked out of the club and get bounced around in the run game in the playoffs last year. And I think he's largely non-dependable when it comes to the inside run. If I were the Niners, I would have signed a guy like Robert Cooper, who I think the Eagles and Seahawks cut at the cut down, the former Florida State fire plug. Put at least one guy on your practice squad who is a true inside A-gap shutdown run defender. One guy that if you're going up against a team, because the Raiders ran it up the gut on them, and so did Denver, and for the most part, so did the Chargers. And the key to the Niner defense is they've got unbelievable lighter, faster speed linebackers you can't go east-west. But the book was you got to run in the A gaps at them, but you couldn't do that when they had DJ Jones. Well, they don't have DJ Jones,
too, right? The book with the wide 9, that wider spread front. You
got bigger gaps. You got guys shooting those gaps, and there's open spaces in the run D. So I think the run D I mean, you can pay Bosa $7 trillion. If you don't get to third and long, what the hell good is Nick Bosa? I mean, Nick Bosa is totally negated if you cannot stop the run and you're looking at a series of 3rd and 1, a series of 3rd and 2s. He's not helping you on 3rd and 1 and 3rd and 2. He's good on 3rd and long. That means you got to win on 1st and 2nd down. And I'm skeptical whether they can do that with the run D that I've seen this summer. I'll leave it at that. We'll see where it goes. We'll see where it goes.
I wanna refute this too. I get caught up in the chat. I definitely do.
Go for it.
But a lot of people are saying that Javon Hargrave's a better run defender than Buckner. That is absolutely false.
Yeah, no, Buckner's consistently. I mean,
I
Hargrave
will
is
say-
a harder guy to block as a pass rusher.
His PFF grade will look better, though, in a one-gap defense, Krueg. Like, for example, Grady Jarrett is the best example. Similar kind of defense. A little different now that Dean Pease is in Atlanta, but he always had a somewhat positive run defense grade, even when he was playing with Dan Quinn and stuff. I mean, it's not exactly the same player, but similar in terms of explosive one-gap gap shooters. I think his quote-unquote PFF grade, in terms of his run defense, is going to look a little bit better with this defense.
Yeah, Judge Shuttle is the one you're talking about, Jesse, right? Niners fans thought Buckner was great. Hargrave's better run defender easily. I totally disagree with that.
Maybe a better pass rusher. For
All
sure.
right,
if we're talking PFF grades, and I don't think PFF is gospel by any means, but I mean, if we can pop up these run defense and tackling PFF grades for Fred Warner, I would say that they bode well for my argument earlier.
Yeah. Okay, so we're roughly an hour into this live stream. We got 7 Bills in the room, and the number keeps going up because you guys are so damn good. Let me thank the sponsors one more time quickly. MarinAutoglass.com, 415-883-3030. New York style Italian sausage, pig in a pickle. And, of course, check out our brand new sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Click the link in the description. You can sign up using the promo code Krueg, Krueg, and they'll match you your first deposit up to 100 bones. I'll be using Underdog Fantasy every week this football season to do fantasy tournaments with our listeners. Kevin, I've got a bunch of things planned as far as Underdog Fantasy. All right, let's hit a couple of these chats. I titled this live stream, Should the Niners Worry About Bosa? We're over an hour into it. We haven't really gotten too much into Bosa. Coaco Puff says, I think he meant Coco Puff. Would you trade Bosa for 3 first-round picks? All right, I don't know if you guys saw the presser, but I asked John Lynch a very direct question. Is there any percentage chance? And I asked this question not because I felt like I needed to after that 49er Reddit report was like, they're going to trade Bosa. And there were a lot of people starting to whisper that in the last few days. So I had an opportunity to ask John firsthand, and I took it on my own to say, you know what, I'll ask the question that will either – heck, I may have upset them last week with my question. Maybe I can advance the story this week with a tough question. And I just said, John, is there any percentage chance that you will trade Nick Bosa? And before I could even really get the words out, he's like, none. That was pretty simple. And it was, some people thought he was mad. I don't think he was mad. He wanted to put that thing to bed. When Shanahan was asked about a trade of Bosa, he wasn't as direct, but basically said the same damn thing. They're not trading Bosa. If you believe the latest from Jason Dumas, who covers the Niners for Kron, which is a local TV channel here in the Bay Area, Jason, who may have some sources, says that the Bosa deal will get done in the next few days. There's been reports that he could be traveling out to California at any moment and that this thing could be just around the corner. If indeed he can sign in the next few days, I think it's no harm, no foul. I didn't want him in camp all summer because of the injury potential, and so I'm okay with him not being there. But it's now really we're at the end of August. Tomorrow is September 1st. And I'll throw it to you guys this way. Is the Nick Bosa holdout, is it officially hurting this football team? Or are we not there yet?
Oh, hurting? I mean, I think that there was some things that happened along the way that were helpful. You talked about the injury side of things. I think the development of some of the younger edge pass rushers was furthered along a lot quicker because Bosa was not there. I think that is in their favor. But then it comes down to what I just talked about, which is Wilkes has not had a chance to work with Bosa. And I do think that is a little bit important. I mean, I think Wilkes is a good defensive coordinator. I think Bosa is a hell of a player, but it would be nice to have some continuity going into this thing for sure. Also, Bosa we know is going to be in great shape, but you do kind of worry once you get this late. Does he get a nagging like soft tissue injury? Are those things avoidable when you've really sat out most of camp and those competitive snaps haven't been there? So I'll say that, and then I'll answer the question. You know, should they trade Bosa for 3 first-rounders? If they're going to trade Bosa, you can't do it now. Now is too late. You're a win now team. It would have had to have been done at the draft, or it has to be done next offseason. You know, maybe this thing lingers on to the end of the season. You're unable to make a deal. He comes back week 8, so he accrues a full year, and you franchise tag him and get rid of him then. But there's no way you can trade Bosa now unless you're getting proven talent back in return that you think can help this team. That's likely not going to happen. Other than that, no, Bosa has to be on this team, regardless of whether he signs a contract or not.
Yeah,
I mean, who would even want Nick? I mean, everybody wants him. Not to interrupt you, Vish, but everybody wants Bosa. But who can really afford a guy at that price tag at this point in the calendar? Right? It's we're at the. I mean, how many teams? If we looked up under the cap, how many teams would have the kind of cap room to accommodate a Nick Bosa contract if they could even satisfy the 49ers in a trade?
I think it would be more than you would be shocked, because his cap hit probably once he signs the extension for this year won't be that bad. And so teams can fit him in this year, and then it's about how do you bargain for the future. But damn, if you have Nick Bosa, I'd rather figure the problem out with the future salary cap with Nick Bosa than without him because of how good he is. And I think Jessie hit it on the head. Like, I think there's absolutely no point and no value, especially with where the 49ers are in terms of what their team needs to trade him at this point. And in terms of, has he gotten to the point that he's hurting the 49ers? No, not yet. It has not been a public distraction this entire offseason, which has been a good thing. But now it's August 31st. This was my deadline for him because this was when Aaron Donald happened to sign in 2018. So I gave the state significance because the Rams went to the Super Bowl that year. Now that he's not signed, if it becomes more of a national conversation and he doesn't get signed before the week of week 1, then yeah, I do think it's at a point where it would be hurting the 49ers because they need Nick Bosa the week going into week 1 because they need Nick Bosa to play week 1. They need Nick Bosa to play week 2. They need Nick Bosa to play week 3 and so on. And so I think that's when it would become a negative situation for the 49ers. If Nick Bosa misses a game, or even if he signs next week and they don't want to run him through because he's had a short abbreviated week of practice and had to go through the contract thing, even then I think it's a miss because, again, this is their best player. They need him on the field in every single game, and it sucks if he's not playing even one game, even if he's signed.
John put it to bed, said they're not going to trade him, but they don't want to trade him. But I'm sure, let's say he wants, Haberman and Middlecoff were discussing this the other day. What if he wants 100% of his contract guaranteed? What's the record for guarantees, Vish? Is it or Jessie, isn't it like
80?
102 guaranteed, 80 million fully guaranteed.
Is that Donald?
For non-quarterback, TJ Watt last year.
TJ Watt, 80 million. The 102 of guaranteed is Joey Bosa, oddly enough, but that's not fully. Yeah.
What if he wanted 130 or 150 guaranteed and just ridiculous guarantees? Would you then change your tune? Or would you just let him sit? And then is there a team out there that you think could come knocking for him? To me, the only team that I think, when I'm just looking at it, that made any sense, he's a Florida guy. So I could see the Dolphins, who didn't want to pay Christian Wilkins. Would you take Jalen Phillips, Christian Wilkins, and a first?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You would?
Yeah. Christian Wilkins
is a lot of people
player. Jalen Phillips is on his way to being that kind of player. A first? Are you kidding? That's like 2 firsts and...
Yeah, it's like 3 firsts.
Yeah, plus
basically
a first, and then for Nick Bosa, yeah.
But the way the Niners talk about this player, you would think that, man, there's no. It would take a monumental type deal. Yes, that's a monumental haul, but this is the defensive. This is maybe a top 3 or 4 player in the entire league, regardless of position. This is the best defensive player in football. This is the reigning defensive player of the year, coming off an 18.5 sack season. You sure as hell better get some ridiculous package if you're trading him. He's 26.
I'm not
might be
saying
25.
he's untradeable. I want to be clear, though. I'm not saying he's untradeable. I just think right now in this moment, because you're not likely to get assets back, proven assets that play this year, I would be more willing than taking 3 first-round draft picks now, which if you had said this back in April before the draft, I'd say, yeah, but let me fly him out to wherever we're trading him to myself.
It doesn't help him win the Super Bowl, though.
It's too much. But the point is that even if he sits his 8 weeks or whatever he can sit, 7 weeks, then you're still going to get him back for a playoff run, which I'll take. And with a win now team, the moment you ship Bosa out for just draft picks and future assets, you've now told your team that you've been saying is win now this whole time. Trent Williams didn't retire, presumably to come back to try to win a Super Bowl. You're now saying that our Super Bowl window is not happening this year. We are in a bit of a rebuild or a retool. Good luck. We're not winning a Super Bowl this year. They can't do that. They absolutely cannot do that.
I think Jesse is absolutely right. And I think that's where Nick Bosa has the most leverage in this situation. Because you can say, well, Bosa's contract request might be ridiculous, but the 49ers really have no other option but to acquiesce to those requests because they created a roster situation where they wanted to get cheaper at quarterback and they wanted to be able to sign all of these guys. Well, if you want to remain a really good football team, that means you have to pay Nick Bosa. And if you have to pay Nick Bosa quarterback money, this is kind of the situation you built for yourself, because if you don't pay Nick Bosa, right? Like if you do, for example, the Chiefs were able to say no to Tyreek Hill in that contract because they knew they could be really good because they had the guy that can compensate and fix that situation. The Niners have no compensation for Nick Bosa. There's no plan B that we're going to be a really, really good football team because of these 8 things if Nick Bosa doesn't show up week 1. And that's where all his leverage exists. And even if he's asking for a ridiculous contract, the Niners are kind of in a situation where after all this planning, building up all this team, having this cheap quarterback and all that, you don't pay Nick Bosa? It's almost like it's spitting in everybody's faces when you don't pay Nick Bosa after telling everybody this was the plan.
I do think there is a limit, though. Like,
no doubt,
if it is that astronomical, I am willing to let him sit his 7 games and get him for the playoff run. Like I would be fine with that and trade him in the offseason.
There may not be a playoff run.
The defense did pretty damn well in 2020 with a lot more injuries than just Nick Bosa. I'm not saying that they can replicate that fully, especially with Wilkes coming in. But when this offense has as many weapons as they do, and if Brock Purdy's as good as everybody's been telling me he is, then they better be able to be 5-3 or 4-4 before Nick Bosa gets back. And if they can't, then Brock Purdy's not who everybody's been telling me he is. And these players that you've been paying a lot of money to aren't as good as what we thought either. They have to figure it out. If you have to go 7 weeks without him, you've got to at least go 4-3 during that stretch, period.
If you go 7 weeks without him, you're kissing away the 1 seed, and you're basically just admitting that you're going to play the NFC Championship game on the road. And, by the way, you already said in this stream that you believe that this could be a year where the offense has to carry the team. And so I kind of question, when off of the CMC trade and the Trey Lance trade, when you're moving that kind of draft capital, in the same year you do that, you say, screw our depth, we're going all in on Javon Hargrave. And then Kosaric tells me 3 weeks ago, I'm not going to play my number 1 defensive line any more snaps than I played my number 1 defensive line last year. And I'm like, oh, no, because that means you're going to be playing your 2s and your 3s. And I've said this stat a few times. You guys have heard it, so forgive me for repeating it for you guys. But for those who haven't heard it, the Niners in the 3 playoff games last year played Ebukam, Amenahue, and Jordan Willis. 3 defensive ends they no longer have. 91 snaps on average in those 3 games. I love Hargrave, but was it wise to give away your depth at defensive line when your whole game plan is to come in waves at the quarterback? And now you look at their defensive line depth, and it's nowhere close. It's nowhere close to what they had. Right now, they're going to, first of all, by the way, the Niners are a 2.5-point favorite over the Steelers in week 1. Is that number based on the belief that Bosa will be there, or is that number you think based on the Niners without Bosa? Like, if Bosa does not sign, will that game go off in and around Niners -2.5, or is that a number that has Bosa re-signing baked into it?
I mean, I think that's the assumption that Bosa's there, but
Yeah.
Under the scenario that I laid out, if you're not going to meet the demands of Bosa, and I do think there's a limit to those demands, and you do have to go the 7 weeks or so without him, then that means you better go get another edge, a proven edge, maybe an older edge, somebody that can give you 20, 30 pass rush snaps a game. But if that's what you have to do, then that's what you have to do to fill the gap until he gets back. I mean, Willis just became a free agent, I believe. I don't know if he got picked up. You can bring him back, but there are guys out there like, JPP. Again, these are not Bosa level guys. I'm not trying to sell it as if they are, but if you just need somebody
Melvin
for a
Ingram.
couple weeks, Melvin Ingram, JPP, Dunlap, those types of guys, they are out there. So if that's what you have to do, then that's what you have to do. But if the other alternative is you're giving him 100 fully guaranteed and 35 million annually, I think you got to pause a little bit. You can't just hand over the money in that scenario.
Yeah, I'm 100%. I feel like I've agreed with Jessie a lot today. My goodness, but I am with Jessie right here.
You guys are like a
well.
father-son team over here.
Yeah. Wow.
Whoa. Somebody on this show is referred to as Kevin's dad. But yeah,
you guys are in lockstep.
But don't you agree? Like, there's no way the Niners can be favored on the road at whatever they call it now, what used to be formerly known as Heinz Field,
right?
Without Nick Bosa, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, to me, you got to have. I think that number has Bosa, the expectation that Bosa is going to be there, all kind of cooked into it. It makes. I'll say this: it makes me nervous. It makes me nervous that they use their D-line the way they have, and they went so top heavy, and now they don't have their top guy signed. So it's like, it's the proverbial lose-lose situation.
I do think he's going to sign, though. I really do.
You do?
We're obviously having a lot of hypothetical conversation here, and maybe the hypotheticals become real. But in my heart of hearts, in my gut, I think he's here for week 1. I do, and I think he's signed a long-term deal by then. But we'll see. We're definitely getting close. We're getting a lot closer than I feel comfortable with. I'll say that.
Me too. And as contentious as all the deals have gotten with this regime, they've always gotten them done. And so until they don't, I feel like they deserve the benefit of the doubt, even though we're here August 31st and it's not done.
Fair enough. I will say this, looking at the cut down and just going through the thousands of names cut, there were some very interesting defensive ends that did not make rosters that aren't necessarily Melvin Ingram money or Carlos Dunlap money. The list that I accumulated had Jose Ramirez, Eastern Michigan, got cut by Tampa. Liked him. Maybe you saw him in the preseason, Jessie. I didn't see him. He's a little on the light side, but I like him. Ali Gay, who played at LSU, got cut by Houston. Habakkuk Baldonado got cut. He played at Pitt. Chase Winovich, you guys know Chase Winovich. The Bears cut Travis Gibson. I think he went to Tennessee today, possibly. Teron Jackson, the former Coastal Carolina DN, cut by Philly. Jeff Gunter from Cincinnati is a decent rusher. Tyrus Wheat and Ben Banagu from Dallas. Brevin Allen from the Chargers. Lonnie Phelps was cut by somebody, Cleveland, I believe. There are some young guys they could go with as well. They haven't necessarily picked up anybody. As far as their practice squads largely. I mean, they picked up Austin. They re-signed Austin Bryant and Kerry Hyder. They put Robert Beal, who they really like, on the IR. So, so we'll see. We'll see. But they haven't added anybody from the outside world yet. Let's hit some of these supers. Flav says, Jets got Zach Wilson and Aaron Rodgers for potentially 3 firsts. We got 3 complete games from the rawest quarterback in NFL history for that, plus a third. Fuck me. Flav jumping in there. Flav, and I thought that FL hat that he always wore was, for Flav, but it's for his company. But he doesn't want to tell me the name of his company. 69ers, there you go, said unexpected player that will have a huge year and year and and why. That's a good one. What do you guys think? I mean, we pour through every angle on the 49ers as content creators. I know you guys have an answer to this. Give me an unexpected player that you think is going to have a huge year for the Niners.
Yeah, Diamador Lenore. I've been saying it. He's the best nickel on this team. If you look at how he looks this offseason, Diamador Lenore is ready for his contract. He's a guy that whatever 194 pounds he weighs in his frame, he's cut up to the max in that frame. He looked as explosive as I think I've ever seen him look on the 49ers. He looks good as an athlete. He looks confident. He looks aggressive. I think he's going to have a very strong year.
Jesse, you got one?
I like it. Yeah, Lenore, that's my guy, man. I've been loving Lenore since he was drafted, but you stole him from me.
Yeah, we can agree again. This is what we do on this show.
No. I'll go with someone else because I think there's multiple players that can do it, and I'm going to go with Womack. I'll go with another corner. I think Womack, to me, really flashed a ton last season. Even when he was on the special teams, it seemed like weekly he was flashing. I think there's a ton of talent there. I believe that he will eventually win that outside job if he hasn't already. And I have a lot of trust in him. I think he's going to play some good football this year. I think he's going to end up playing a lot of football. And I think Womack can be a hell of a difference maker for this team.
You stole my guy. No, I mean, I do like that one. You know, it's hard to, first of all, say who's unexpected, though. Like, right? You know, it's like we're all kind of we've poured through so many of these guys. Like, would Drake Jackson be an unexpected player? Because I think Drake could have a huge year compared to last year.
Drake is expected.
Yeah, he's a
It'll
starter.
It'll be unexpected if he's not like good. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I would say Drake is definitely a guy that I really think could have a phenomenal year. I'll go with one. I really believe that when we look back at this season, that Braden Willis, who right now sits fourth on the depth chart, will wind up being tight end 2. I think he'll make a number of plays. I think he'll score 4 or 5 touchdowns receiving. I think they'll go to the double tight end set.
4 or 5 touchdowns. Wow.
I do believe so because he's got great hands. He's a receiver. Kittle always has injuries. Look at Brock's history of going to tight ends. I mean, he made Charlie Kohler, and, you know, God bless Charlie Kohler and his family, but Charlie Kohler's a freaking stiff. And he made that guy look really good. Kittle could literally add another floor to his house based on the 7 touchdowns that Brock tossed him last year. Kittle will probably be dinged up. Warner can't catch a cold. Dwelly's a special teamer. That leaves Braden Willis. And I think Braden Willis is going to be a player. I think he's a player. I think he's ready to contribute right away. I love the way he goes about his business in practice. He's got attention to detail. He brings fire in almost every drill. The greatest thing about Braden Willis is not his height, it's not his hands, it's not his speed, it's his heart. The guy's got this tremendous desire to succeed. So I like Braden Willis. I think he's going to be big.
I like it.
Thank you, 69ers. Ty Budd says top 5 first-round NFL quarterbacks of all time.
So I already thought about this because
what is this? Ask Jeeves or something? And now we have a search engine.
I thought about this because I saw the super chat come in, so I got my list ready.
Okay,
Manning,
go for it. God.
Manning, Rodgers, Elway, Marino, and Mahomes. Yeah, obviously Mahomes. Yeah, those are the 5 for me.
Yeah, no order.
Hard.
I agree.
That's hard to beat that.
Yeah.
By the way, did you guys see Montana said that Marino's the greatest quarterback of all time?
Yeah, I'm not shocked by that.
I didn't see it, but I mean, Marino is. I mean, if Marino played today, he'd have a 6,000-yard passing season.
Yeah.
So.
Marino was something else, man. He was something else. And he was in what was the Jim Carrey movie that he was in?
Ace Ventura.
Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. That's right. Marino seemed like a cool guy too. And supposedly, talk about how times have changed. Supposedly, he did not get taken in the first round because he smoked weed in college. Wow.
I thought he was picked 25th.
Who?
Yeah, but Dan Marino.
Oh, yeah, but there was character issues, right? Because he was in the famous 83 draft, right?
But I mean, I'm just saying, look how times have changed. I mean, literally, you could probably buy weed in like stadiums now, and
right.
and then I mean, it's like he's the Antichrist. He smoked some grass. So there you go.
The funny thing is, do you guys know? Because you guys are a little older than me. You know what my initial interactions with Marino were?
What's
in
that?
like 2007, 2008, he used to do that stupid weight loss commercial where they would send you like that plan. It would be like, Dan Marino lost 40 pounds
Yeah,
on
yeah,
blah,
yeah,
blah,
yeah.
blah, blah, blah. That was like my first, like, holy crap, that's
Nutrisystem,
Dan Marino.
Nutrisystem. It was
Nutrisystem.
Nutrisystem. Yeah, yeah.
That's what it was.
Didn't he also do isotoners?
I don't know. Did he?
If the glove doesn't fit, you must have quit.
Oh gosh.
Oh, I think that might have been him too. You're right.
I think he
you're
might have
right.
done isotoners. Mr. Blue Magic, who we had on our call-in show. Mr. Blue, good to see you, man. He says you really forgot what Jeff Garcia looked like. I'm not forgetting Jeff Garcia. I like Jeff Garcia. I don't think Jeff Garcia was as good at quarterback as what Brock Purdy potentially is going to be. And I know Jeff Garcia made a Pro Bowl, so I realized what I'm saying there. I like Jeff Garcia. I scouted him in the Canadian League when he was the third-string quarterback behind Doug Flutie for the Calgary Stampeders. So I go way back with Jeff, but I just think Purdy's a little bit better processor, a little bit better arm strength, a little bit more accurate, a little bit, just a little bit better,
He may end up being there, but
two?
the question is who are you more comfortable with? I mean, going into this season, not seeing it yet, I would definitely go with Jeff Garcia, who, when he was coming off of a 4,000-yard passing season and looked great. And I mean, we didn't get into it very much, but I definitely would have gone with Kaepernick coming off of a Super Bowl season. No question asked.
Yeah,
Vish?
I would have gone Kaepernick coming off this Super Bowl season. And I actually think for myself, if I'm being 100% honest, Garoppolo 2018 is somewhere in the conversation of being up there in terms of confidence. Like, yeah, dude, at 2018, I was like, yeah, I was on top of the world. And yeah.
Joe E says, do you think it will be Embry versus Allen Robinson or Oliver versus Allen Robinson, Ward and Lenore outside on Pickens and Johnson, or am I wrong? Fast forward to a week from Sunday. We haven't really hit on Steelers. Of course, we've got next week's show to get really deep into the matchup. How do you guys see it? I mean, personally, all this talk about Oliver, and I know the Niners are saying all the right things. I think at the end of the day, I'm putting my three best corners on the field, and my three best corners are Mooney, Lenore, and Womack. And I'm playing Lenore in the slot.
I agree.
All I'm hearing is hallelujah. That's all I've been saying this entire offseason.
No, seriously, I stole your point. That's basically your point from weeks ago.
You amplified my point. You amplified it. It now has credibility.
There you go. Next time I steal somebody's point, I'm gonna be like, hey, I didn't steal your shit. I amplified it.
There you go.
I amplified it. I'll say that to my wife next time she blames me at a cocktail party for telling whatever. Honey, I didn't steal your story. I amplified it.
Exactly. Honey, your story isn't weird. It's unusual.
I'll still be sleeping on the couch. Matthew Rowley says, Jesse, when Lance never sees the field, will you admit that he just wasn't good enough, or will it always be he never got a shot?
Well, you've already talked
in
$5
just to talk to Jesse.
Yeah, he's already said twice that he believes that it's a proven done deal that Trey's a bust. So, will you admit that right now that you just don't know? And if you do that, then I'll admit what you want me to admit. But I have a feeling
kind of reminds me of the court scene from A Few Good Men. Will you stipulate that none of these people were in the room at 0600? Mm-hmm. So basically, he's calling you out for saying that Lance never got a shot. Well, I mean, do you think that Lance never got a shot, or do you think that Lance?
No, he got a shot, but it wasn't enough. Like, again, he should have started year one. Period. If you draft a quarterback like that, you draft him that high, a player that already sat a year, you have to play him year one. And hindsight's 2020. I still think Lance was the right pick. I still think he was the right fit. But if the 49ers had said, all right, fans, this is our plan, regardless of who we draft, we're going to sit him year one, I would have said, absolutely not. You do not draft Trey Lance. That is not a player that you can draft. He has to play immediately. And if I would have known that was the plan going into it, then I would have said definitely no on Trey Lance. But I assume that whoever they picked, because they went all in to go get that pick, that they would have been all in immediately. And that wasn't the case. So here we are.
Seriously, you almost get the feeling like they made these decisions in a vacuum and they hadn't really thought it all the way through. Are we willing to give this prospect that's young and raw, but with the highest upside? They took the macro view on the pick and then took the micro view of playing the quarterback. And it's like, that's great that you took the macro view on the quarterback, but if they were going to be all in on winning immediately, which they were because they were inside their Super Bowl window, I get the sense that maybe Shanahan did want Mac Jones and maybe he acquiesced to the room on Trey Lance because others liked it, but he should have been more vocal than if that was the case. Now, Shanahan would deny it because Shanahan said that he's, was all in on Trey Lance. But let's just say for the sake of the conversation that Kyle wanted Mac and he just wanted he wanted a cheaper version of Jimmy so he could keep all of his stars and roster together. To me, that makes sense. Maybe the room or the fan base convinced him to go with Trey because of the upside potential. They fell in love with who Trey was, but if they really were wed to only giving him, the fact of the matter, he just said it. He's like, hey, we went with a young quarterback. We gave him 2 years. Now we're going with another young quarterback. Was 2 years enough? Was 2 years enough? If I had said to you on draft day, the Niners have just drafted Trey Lance, who's played only in the FCS level, and he's thrown fewer passes than any player coming drafted in the first round in the last 40 years. And if they had announced on draft night, and we will give this young prospect 2 years to see if it works out, and if not, we will pawn him at a loss. I think there probably would have been a lot of people asking questions right then and there.
I agree, but I think that those questions were definitely fair to ask even then. And I think your point about macro view versus micro view was exactly right. And they made a lot of decisions in a vacuum on what made sense without thinking of the bigger picture, I think, in a lot of different instances. Where I would maybe ask you is because to me, when you describe Shanahan as being convinced after making that move, when you're Kyle Shanahan, you are supposed to be the most powerful non-Jed York person on this team. You are supposed to be the one that has the final say on the 53. You hired John Lynch. You are the one ultimately working with the quarterback. To me, it's actually an indictment of Shanahan if somebody convinced him here of another quarterback. I don't know if you want to go there, but like when you describe that situation, and perhaps it's true, but to me, that's actually a criticism. Like that comes across as Shanahan. Why did you trade that? If the 49ers trade 3 firsts for a quarterback, it means Kyle Shanahan loves the whatever quarterback, so-and-so. But if he's getting convinced out of a quarterback when you're trading up 3 firsts, then the whole process is 8 different kinds of whack. Do you agree with me or am I too far there?
I agree.
No, I agree. But also to the super chat, really what I should have said, I've actually got a canned answer on my show for this when people bring up Trey is, I don't know. He's a Dallas Cowboy now and a backup quarterback over there. So are you a Dallas Cowboy fan? Because everybody expected me to go to Dallas somehow with Trey Lance. So are you a Dallas Cowboy fan in the 49er chat or is this a 49er chat? I'm a little confused.
By the way, Ryan Hensley put out a Trey Lance video today from Talking in Dallas. And Rye's got, I don't know how many followers he's got on Twitter, but it's not more than, it's under 10,000. But the tweet that he put out, did you see how many people saw that tweet? It was like 500,000 or something.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, Rye in his bag on Twitter. Roberto Davis says, by the way, I moved seats here because I figured, you know what, Jesse's the guest. Why have the words over him? But, let's freshen up the room. Let's switch you guys around here. There we go. Let's move. Let's all change seats now. That's the beauty of StreamYard. You can just play this game back and forth all day, and it's just a lot of fun. This is the kind of thing that I really enjoy. All right, Roberto Davis says Bosa will sign, and with Hargrave will break the team's sack record over under 17 sacks. Man, I guess I would say that. Man, 17's a big number, man.
Hargrave will? No, absolutely not.
No. He's saying Bosa will sign, and with Hargrave will break the team's sack record.
So he's saying Bosa. Hargrave would. I'm like, no, yeah. Hargrave.
No, Hargrave had 11, and that was his high. Bosa had 18.5. Now he's saying he's going 17. I would say I'll go under. I'll go under
I'll
because
take
some
the
of those
under, too.
sacks that
under.
that Bosa got last year, Hargrave will get this year.
Not just
Yeah,
that. I think they were
other
in a
players
lot
will get
of
cleanup.
that, and I think they were in a lot of really good situations in the back half of the year. They played a lot at home. They played a lot of games where they were ahead for a good portion of the games. The schedule worked out for 18.5 sacks. Bosa might be equally as good next year, but you need a lot of things to work out to sack the quarterback 18.5 times in an NFL season.
No doubt. 49er Glory says Bosa's about to have a post-contract Debo year. Was that bad or was that good?
Oh,
Yeah,
that would be
bad, right?
bad.
That means hurt. That means bloated and hurt.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I hope not anyways.
God, I hope not. That'll be the quickest, rough spot to this season. Matthew Rowley says if we could get a good young defensive end, a first and a second, and then go sign Jason Pierre-Paul, Clowney, and a defense.
Clowney's already signed.
Yeah,
Clowney's a Raven. And a decent defensive tackle, I would do that all day. Yeah. So there you got one guy who's willing to pivot off of Bosa. Michael Alanis, I'd like to know where this 35 to 40 million is coming from. Debo set to make 20 million next year, and other contracts set to rise in 2024. Nick wants to live in Florida. Just send him to Miami for 3 1s.
I like the Miami deal that you suggested. The Miami deal you suggested is like hallelujah. It's like Christmas come early. If you're trading Nick Bosa, that's like the only deal that makes sense to me, right? Because I feel like when we're talking about trading Nick Bosa too, then we're saying, okay, let's philosophically shift this defense a little bit. And like if we look at 2020 when they were top 5 without Bosa, you're talking about a much better secondary with Jimmy Ward, who's definitely a better player than anybody left on the secondary. Jason Verrett played like a near all-pro that year. Emmanuel Mosley had a pretty strong season that year. So it was a better secondary as well. And that's where I think philosophically they're stuck. Because if you look at their secondary right now, I don't know if they're in a position where, okay, we get 3 1s for Nick Bosa, or we have a mediocre pass rush now, so we really need to cover and play a little more man coverage. I don't know if they're equipped to do that.
Well, not to mention, I mean, how's that dialogue going to go with Trent?
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Trent, we got 3 number 1s. F you.
He's retiring.
I mean, he'd be pissed.
Yeah, but as far as the money goes, so the 49ers right now, I believe, are in the red around $2 million next year.
I think so, yeah.
If Trent Williams retires, there's the money. And I think this is a big possibility. I think there's a chance that Armstead's not on this team going into next year. If that's the case, now you're in the green. Now you're in the green, almost 10 million right there. So there's money.
Kittle. Yeah, well, I mean, then to pay Brandon Ayuk, right? Though, so it's like, okay, create money, but they got to create it because somebody else needs to be paid.
The sky is falling on future cap is not worth getting exercised about. Not in a sport where guys' careers are over in the blink of an eye. Not in a sport where guys can opt to retire. Not in a sport where if you want to, you can renegotiate a few guys and kick the can one more year down the road. I mean, there's just lots of different ways to deal with the cap. I can't get super exercised about next year's cap.
They've been calling me Chicken Little Crew because I've been getting worked up about the Saints cap for the last 5 years. Sky is falling. Sky is falling. It never seems to be falling.
Seriously.
Oh, it fell on the Saints. They're not the same Saints.
They're not.
But they still got Derek Carr, right? Like they still haven't given up. They still haven't said we resigned to the cap.
They need to. They need to rebuild. They're in I hate what the Saints are doing, honestly.
Dazza 0187. How concerned are you guys about Purdy going back to load management given we're so close to game 1 of the season?
Rewind about an hour. We talked about it for a good 20 minutes.
Yeah, seriously. Thanks for joining the dialogue. And he may have put that in there an hour ago.
He may have, yeah.
And if he did, I apologize. Mark Hope says, great show, gentlemen. Compared to what? No, I'm just joking. Jesse Wade says, in this offense with these weapons, question mark? What's the thing from Ron Burgundy? He's like, I am Ron Burgundy. Remember that? And he just read with the question mark. If you put it on the teleprompter, Burgundy will read it. In this offense with these weapons, you take Garcia and Cap over Brock. That is absolute insanity. You discredit what this kid actually did last year. Oh,
dude. I mean, I can't. I don't know, man. To me,
it's a point of
like
view.
saying with your chest out. No questions, unequivocally, I'm taking a player that I've seen for 8 games over guys who at least have a couple years that they've done something. And we're talking about not them at the tail end. We're talking about those players in their prime. So they both had a good 2-3 year run. We saw what that looked like. To say that you would absolutely take it is insanity. And then if you don't, you're discrediting Brock. It's like, man, how can you win? How can you have a nuanced conversation about any player in this league if you're discrediting them whenever you say, hey, I'm not going to take them over guys who are more proven, or I'm not going to put them in the top 5 just because the statistics say so after 7 games? Like, how do you even have a conversation about it?
And it's
what the hell? But thanks for the super chat.
Because it's an emotional thing, right? Because you look at Brock and he went 7-0 / like 8-0 / whatever, and it's like very impressive. But then you look at what we looked at from Kaepernick, and that was also a limited sample size, 2012 to 2013. But look at the resume. Went into New Orleans and beat the New Orleans Saints with Drew Brees and Sean Payton. They went into New Orleans and beat that team. They went into Foxborough and beat Brady and Belichick in December. I don't think Brady had lost in December in like 5 years at the time at Foxborough. And they went in the cold weather and he outgunned Brady. He threw for 4 touchdowns in that game. And then you go into the playoffs, the 17-0 start with Julio Jones having one of the greatest quarters you've ever seen in an NFC championship game. Coming back down in the Georgia Dome, the 1-seed Falcons, the loudest stadium in the league that year. Coming back after throwing the pick 6 to Sam Shields against Aaron Rodgers and having the historic playoff game. If we sat here in 2013 and we did a revisionist of Kaepernick's 8 games the same way we feel about Brock's 8 games too right now, I don't know how you cannot say it would be a close conversation. Like, how can you say it's so obviously Brock and we're discrediting him? Like, Kaepernick did a lot in 2012 to make us confident to 2013. No, it's a matter of perspective.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it's a point of view. It's a point of view. Let's not lose our mind. What the hell? But thank you.
For no. Listen. I love debate. Like, I get fired up. I'm not mad. To me, it's like to say like so definitively that it's not a conversation. Like, that's where I'm like, hold on, it's definitely a conversation. If there's at least one person that thinks it's a conversation the other way, then it's definitely a conversation. You know what I mean? So to me, like, that's what it comes down to. And I don't think it's hating on Brock Purdy when you say things like that. I'm sorry. That's not a hateful comment. I'm not saying Brock Purdy sucks. I'm not saying I don't trust Brock Purdy this year. I haven't said any of those things. I'm just saying, compared to players that have proven track record and were in their primes, I'm taking those players. Now, in a year from now, if the question is Brock Purdy versus those guys, I may say Brock Purdy because I've seen it now for a full year, but I'm not doing it after 7 games.
You're such a hater, Jesse.
Yeah,
no,
Jesse.
I'm just kidding. Mr. Blue Magic is taking me to task. He says, Brock, bigger arm than Jeff Garcia. Larry, you big in 4,000 plus yards and 30 plus touchdowns, 3,500 plus yards and 30 touchdowns, 3,000 plus yards and 20 plus touchdowns with less talent, Larry. FR. What's that? For real?
For real,
you are Purdy's pimp. I see it now. LOL. Mr. Blue Magic. I love you, bro. I love you. But don't call me Purdy's pimp. That's all right. That's all right. Call me whatever you want. Just call me. Dazzo0187. Call me. Don't know if the fans were against drafting Mac Jones, just against him being drafted at 3 after we traded 3 first-round picks when you could have taken him at 12. He wouldn't have been there at 12. Somebody would have jumped in front of them. But you know what? If people are really, going back to it, let's talk about it for just 1 second. It was that picture of him with the boiler. It was the McCorkle. When he's sitting there with the big boiler and people are like, you traded up for that donkey? No way. And, just the interview that he did, that really long interview, and I don't know. There were several things that I think a lot of people didn't like. He was a tennis player. People had the Rosen thoughts in their mind.
He did bring up one good point, though.
Mac ain't bad, actually.
I think the one good point he did bring up was that they could have waited. They didn't have to trade up a month before the draft. Like, there was not urgency a month before the draft that they had to be there. And they felt said that like it was all about further evaluating the quarterbacks, but not in secret. But if you're already willing to go up, you should already know who you're going to take. In this,
Lynch was on record as saying he felt like they would have had to pay more if they were in a reactionary mode. They felt like they had to be the first team. But yeah, I mean, I think the lesson learned there is Don't
They paid
trade
the
up.
most in NFL history. So
Don't trade up unless you have a definitive guy you're trading up to get that you know you're going to get. To this day, I really believe that they were trading up with the idea that maybe they would get Zach Wilson. I think Shanahan liked Zach Wilson. I really believe that. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I believe. Matthew Rowley says, I know Lance has practiced for 2 years. Practices are taped, reviewed. Couldn't beat Jimmy, Brock, or Darnold. Half as many snaps in the NFL as in the FCS. I think the NFL snaps tell the true story. Okay.
Is that it, Jessie? Go at Jessie. Come on.
I don't talk about Dallas Cowboy quarterbacks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
On to Cincinnati. Jesse's on to Pittsburgh.
That's a man. You're talking about a man who's looking up at Cooper Rush right now. All right. Luis Villalpando says, shout out to you guys, Vish, Jessie, and Kevin's dad. You're the best. But come on, Vish, fix that background. Look, Vish took a lot of time to carefully craft that background. He spent all day on that thing.
What's the divot in the ceiling called again?
It's a tray ceiling.
A tray ceiling.
And I bet you Vish has 2 sinks. All right. Flav says, here's $9.99. I think they were open to the idea of starting Trey this year. But it became clear he wasn't anywhere close. The team wouldn't have bought into, and Kyle Shanahan probably would have lost his job by now if they did it. I just think that they were a little disingenuous, I think, a little bit about this competition. I think there may have been a competition, but what they didn't tell us that we kind of knew, and I kind of knew it, at the time, is it wasn't a competition where everybody was starting at the same point. It was Darnold was the leader in the clubhouse because he was the latest guy hired. Brandon Allen was going to be here because they said something to him and his agent to get him to not go somewhere else. And so Trey was put in a position where he had to beat them out. And one of the things I brought up on the radio today, and I really believe this, is that when you go back and review all the comments that Trey has made in the last 6 months or so, how many times did he come out and say, hey, guys, at the end of the day, I just want a chance to compete? You don't say that if you're being given a chance to compete. You say that when you're not being given a chance to compete. And I think what Trey was trying to tell us is that the competition was a farce, and that he really, in his opinion, and that he really wasn't being given a legitimate chance to compete, that he was part of a competition where he was really behind those other guys and had to outplay them to beat them out. I really believe that, because he said it many times. He said, I really just want a chance to compete. Well, he was, theoretically he was given that chance, but he was kind of telling us that he didn't believe he was getting that legitimate chance. That was my read on that.
Jessie, do you want to rescind your previous comments and jump in here?
Yeah, I don't talk about Dallas Cowboy quarterbacks.
He's still on to Pittsburgh.
That's Cooper Rush's backup.
That's the no. That's my. I'm just here so I don't get fined.
Okay.
Yeah. This Marshawn Lynch Super Bowl deal. Mr. Blue Magic says, we can't say the NFC is trash and praise the team for losing in the NFC Championship. I'm not happy just getting a game away every year, period. I hear you. I don't think they are either, to be honest. 69ers, thank you for coming back. He says the 49ers win the Super Bowl if this stream continues all the way till Super Bowl Sunday.
I like that.
Do you like that? No. If they host the NFC Championship game.
I would say if Brock Purdy, and he doesn't even have to be this, but if he can have a run like a Flacco or a Foles where he plays like a top 10 quarterback during the playoffs, then I think they win the Super Bowl.
If they don't play.
Wait, say that again, Jesse. Say that again.
If Brock Purdy has a run like Flacco or Foles, I'm not even saying he has to be this for his career.
Right.
But
he has an epic year.
Yeah, not if he has an epic year. He has an epic playoff run. I think they're going to make the playoffs. And I think the proof's in the pudding. We've seen it. As long as Brock Purdy is who he was last year, they're going to win a lot of games. So they're going to make the playoffs. If he can have a top 10 quarterback like playoff run, they will win the Super Bowl.
I'll add this. The 49ers will have a great chance to win the Super Bowl, if not win it, if Colton McKivitz can pass protect. Because I like Trent, and I think they've got enough beef at guard I'm just a little concerned about how few games Colton McKivitz has started in the NFL. To start him at right tackle and to say he's the guy, and I love Colton, he's a great guy. It's a little bit of a projection. Now, can he make it look good? That's the question.
I got a different answer for both of you. The 49ers will win the Super Bowl if they don't face the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I don't think they're beating the Chiefs in that game if they end up there, regardless of how things look.
I kind of agree with that, too. I think, they need to have a great year. Everything needs to break right, and somebody needs to knock off Kansas City because they won't. Yeah. I'm predicting Niners-Chargers in the Super Bowl.
I like that matchup a lot. Are you kidding?
Well, Chargers are pretty loaded, too.
I know.
Anthony says, Larry, what was your take on?
Too, don't you? Would you pick the Niners in that game?
I would take the Niners. The Niners, but I think the Niners and Chargers are very similar, very talented football teams that have suffered a lot of injuries, and they've suffered so many injuries, both teams, that we don't really. I think the Chargers get less respect than almost any team in pro football. If you go look at their talent, and the only reason I'm saying this is because I just watched them in the preseason and I looked at their roster, they're freaking loaded.
Yeah,
the Chargers are really, really loaded. Herbert is a spectacular talent. Eckler is a really good receiver out of the backfield. They've got 3 Mongo receivers in Keenan Allen, Quentin Johnston, and Mike Williams. That Darius Davis is exactly the kind of burner that you want to complement those behemoths with. The left side of their line is Rashawn Slater and Zion Johnson. I think that's a terrific left side. Jamari Salyer, the right guard, is a terrific player as well. Everett, I think, could have a career year. And look what they got on D. You got Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa coming off the edges. That kid Deion Henley that they just drafted from Wazoo is a beast. The kid from
I don't know
SC,
if I trust their coaching staff though, and that's
I hear you. You're right. That's a good call, Brandon Staley.
I trust Brandon Staley on defense in terms of how he's going to coordinate their defense.
Do you trust Kellen more though?
No, and I don't trust Brandon Staley, the decision maker, as a head coach. And then finally, Krug, I think their talent on defense. I think a few of those names have been a little bit more names than substance of late.
Yeah, but I'll say this: they got some. They drafted some really good players here. This Dayron Henley is a big-time player. The USC kid, Tuli Tupoladu, that guy's flat-out nasty. Matlock, the Boise State D lineman's had a great camp. And then look at that secondary. Derwin James, J.C. Jackson, J.T. Woods, Asante Samuel. They got some nice players back there, so we'll see. Dicker, the kicker. They got some talent. What is it? What's this one? Anthony says, Larry, what was your take on him firing?
The Jim Harbaugh firing, he's asking.
Oh, on Jim Harbaugh. I happened to be in the room when he after the week 16 or 17 final game of the regular season, and when they finished 8-8, and Harbaugh, and I just had because the media guy let me in the room. He didn't realize Harbaugh wasn't done breaking down the team. There's a little bit of a doorway there, so I walked from the outside corridor right up to the doorway of the locker room. I saw that he was huddling everybody together, and then I was already there, so I'm like, I'll just wait here for a second. And he gave it a "Who's got it better than us?" And literally, it was like nobody. It was like he had lost that room. To some degree, the enthusiasm that Jimmy had at the beginning was not there at the end. So I didn't like it. I didn't like moving on from Harbaugh. He was 44-19-1, and they stammered around in the dark for 3, 4, 5 years after that. So no, I did not like that. But I do think that he had lost some of his guys. I think he works perfect in college. Because, there's new guys after a few years, and then all these who's got it better than us enthusiasm. By the time you're tired of it, you're graduating.
So this day with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind.
He's tougher than a $2 steak. But I love – did I ever tell you my Harbaugh story after the Super Bowl?
No.
So they lose to the Saints. They lose to the Saints. I'm in the locker room. Alex Boone says, hey, man, you want to do an interview? because he had been my go-to guy in the post game. I'm like, dude,
right.
I need an interview. The radio station sent me here for like 10 days. I've been doing nothing but getting drunk. I've got to come up with something. It's Super Bowl Sunday. I know nobody wants to talk. He's like, Krueg, I got you. And when I see Boone, it's
Krueg,
like,
can you rewind the story to what was going on the entire week at New Orleans for Larry Krueger?
well, let's just say this, Vish. My show was live West Coast, 9 a.m. to noon. That might be the only 3 hours that I was sober because it was actually 11 to 2. So that's 11 to 2 in the Central Time Zone. I think New Orleans is in the Central. So I basically, I was on the air from 11 a.m. till 2 p.m., and I had to wear dark glasses every day. I mean, we were in the quarter till 6 a.m. I broke up a fight between a dad and his son. I just got so wasted in that. I went to 5-star dinners and vomiting and you name it. I mean, it was just, I was letting it all hang out. Anyway, so the Super Bowl ends, they lose. You guys knew that. I need an interview. I go to Boone. Boone's like, Krueg, I'll help you out. He goes, I don't want to do it with everybody here because I don't want to answer if you interview me for 5 minutes and then here comes the whole media throng. He goes, can we duck into a side room? I'm like, no sweat, let's do it. So we duck into a side room, connected to the locker room. We do like a 10-minute interview. I got this great interview. Now I'm just trying to find my way back to the broadcast booth so I can do the post-game show. But I got like a half hour in the Superdome's all these corridors. So he walks back into the locker room. I walk the other way. There's another door. It opens. It's a room. It's a big room. I walk to the end of that room. I open another door. There's another room. I open another door. There's all these rooms. It's like this labyrinth of rooms. And I'm just trying to find my way back. I walk in to the third room. I open the door, and there's a guy sitting in a chair facing the wall, rubbing his head. And I walk, I walk like 20 yards towards him. And as I get right up on him, it's Harbaugh. And he's sitting there, and he just lost the Super Bowl to his brother. And he's sitting in the room by himself. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, Coach. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to find my way to the main corridor. I'm sorry, sorry, you guys. Sorry for the loss. I know it's obviously crushing, and I just want to get out of here. And I go, do you know how to, which way he goes, he just kind of points to the door. And I'm like, thanks. And I got out of there. I walked in on Harbaugh in a private moment, just sitting there absorbing that loss. And he was crushed, man. He was absolutely crushed. And I'll never forget that. I don't think he even said anything. I don't think he pointed there, was like, there, that gets you out. I'm like, thanks. But yeah, no, Jim, I really like Jim. I thought Jim was, he's a tremendous coach. He's a tremendous football coach.
I will say that game, that Super Bowl ruined the Harbaugh era for me. I don't know about you guys, but I thought the 49ers were way better than that Baltimore team. I thought they were a little bit over the hill. I know they went to New England and won, but I think the 2011 team that they should have beaten when Lee Evans dropped the pass and then Billy Cundiff missed the kick, like that Patriots team was terrible. They had the 32nd ranked defense and they went to the Super Bowl. And that Super Bowl, not just the fact that they lost and how they lost, but the fact that they had a pre-snap penalty on the first play of the game. The team was ill-prepared to play the game. And to me, that was an indictment of Jim Harbaugh. And for all the great things he did, it leaves a sour taste in my mouth.
There's a lot of bitterness in that game. That was the one. When I think of the one that got away, I don't think of Kansas City or Emmanuel Sanders or Jimmy Garoppolo. I think of 1st and goal on the 7. You got a running quarterback. You got a Hall of Fame halfback. They both had tremendous passion to win, and you don't run. You throw 3 fades with a quarterback that has no touch at all to Michael Crabtree. Oh my God, that was embarrassing. The other thing, what they overcame one of the worst calls in the history of the Super Bowl. Bruce Miller was literally tackled on the Jacoby Jones 98-yard return right in the middle of the field, and not a single official saw it. I mean, literally sandwiched, and Jacoby Jones ran right through his gap all the way. Bruce Miller makes that tackle 100 times out of 100 if he's not double held there, no call. And then the biggest mistake is you never, ever, ever call a fucking timeout when you have a old, decrepit Ed Reed, an old, decrepit Ray Lewis at the end of a long drive. The Niners were the younger, fresher team. Baltimore had old man Lewis, old man Reed, old man Bernard Pollard. They were all sucking wind at that point, and they called a GD timeout. You do not call a timeout at the end of a long drive in the fourth quarter against an old team. They called a timeout, and they had bungled getting plays called on time all season long. It bit them in the ass in the worst moment. If they don't call that timeout, I believe they win that game. You don't ever. I mean, it's like somebody who's gasping for air, and you let a proud Ravens team with all these decrepit old guys, catch a breath, towel off, and load up for that last series. Never should have happened. They should have. I would have gone no huddle, Kaepernick on a run pass option to the right, told him to run it in. I would have no huddled on second down and did it again the other way to the wide side of the field. I would have ran at them. Instead, 3 fades to Crabtree. You got to be freaking kidding me. That was the worst Super Bowl play calling I think I've ever seen. And as you can tell, I'm over it. Dazzo0187 says, how different do you think Trey would have looked like with a quarterback-friendly head coach like Dable, Sirianni, Reed, and Carroll? I think that's too critical of Kyle. I think Trey's problems are just about the fact that Trey's raw. I really believe that. I think Trey needs reps, and I don't know if he's going to get him in Dallas, but he didn't get him here either.
I don't know if it would have looked that much different if they were all in this situation, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I have something to add to that.
Yeah,
I don't talk about Dallas Cowboy quarterbacks.
Oh.
Couple last supers. Mark Hope says, question. Oh, look at that. I've never shortened question. 1 NFL O-lineman can handle 2 pass rushers usually. Who's stepping up to get after the quarterback in Pittsburgh week 1? Question 2, big picture, we know Pitt will run and play at home. Any thoughts? Well, I mean, hopefully Drake Jackson steps up and has a huge game. Maybe Cleveland Farrell steps up and has a huge game. As far as Pittsburgh running the ball, if Pittsburgh runs as successfully as the Niners opponents have in the preseason, it's going to be a long day at the office.
Here's a name to watch specific to them running it. I like Jaylen Warren a lot. To me, Jaylen Warren is their Tony Pollard to Najee Harris's Zeke Elliott. He's got some pop when he runs it. He's got some pop as a receiver. Tony Pollard gave this defense a lot of issues before he snapped his ankle in the NFC divisional round. That's, to me, the guy to look out for. I don't think they'll have issues with Najee Harris.
We're going to know about McKivitz pretty quick, though. I mean, he's going to have a full game against Watt. I mean, that's where Watt lines up there all game long. So it's going to get real interesting real quick.
With a lot of different blitzes, yeah.
I like the way McKivitz has looked in the preseason, though, man. I mean, he's moving his feet. He's in great shape. I think he's ready for his opportunity here. I mean, sometimes you get your opportunity before you're ready for it. His opportunity has come at the right time for him in his career. I think he's ready for it. We'll see. Because, the one thing, if you look at the number of starts he has, man, it's not very many. You look at the number of snaps he's played in the NFL, it's not very many. And you're asking him to step in at right tackle and be the man all year without fail. And that's a tall task. That's a big ask. And I did throw a K on there. All right, Mark Hope says the 49ers win versus any team other than Kansas City. Yo, you're all dismissing Burrow, Allen, Herbert, Rodgers, Jackson like that. I just think Vish is right. I think we have Kansas City, scarring, and we don't fear some of these other teams as much. I don't fear Niners against Chargers. I don't fear Niners against Ravens. I don't fear Niners against Bengals. I think the Niners can beat those teams. I do fear Niners against Kansas City.
If you look at those matchups too, like Buffalo's offensive line is terrible. The Jets' offensive line is their biggest question mark. We'll see about Baltimore's offensive line, how healthy they are this year, but they're good when they're healthy, right? And Bengals' offensive line is much improved, but it's still bottom half of the league. So it's a favorable matchup with how it matches up for the Niners to be able to stop those quarterbacks. But then you get to Kansas City, and you get the guy who kind of makes it work with bad protection. And when they do protect them, well, they're scoring 35, so you better hope you score 36.
69er says the most wholesome fan base is.
Oh, the Eagles. They're the worst. I don't. Maybe a fan base that doesn't seem to exist, like Arizona. I don't even.
I'll say I'll say this based on my experiences of traveling the country. I've been to Philly. I've been to Chicago. I've been to L.A. I've been to Seattle. I've been to a bunch of different spots. I scouted in the Canadian League. Definitely the most wholesome are the Canadian fans for sure. But seriously, I went to a Rolling Stones concert. I was the only person standing. I stood up and was like, "Fuck yeah, Mick!" And like some people looked at me and like a security guard came over. I'm like, "Hey, sorry, I was getting excited." I mean, seriously, the entire stadium sat during the Rolling Stones. The entire concert. I was the only person that ever stood up. But I would say the Dallas Cowboy fans. When I went to Texas Stadium in '95. And I'm wearing Niner colors, and I'm sitting at the 50, and I'm flipping birds, and I'm swearing at them. And that was when the Gerback rolled in there, 13-point dogs, and the Niners pulled the upset. In normal stadiums, somebody would have came down and put their fist in my mouth. And their fans are like dressed up. They got scarves, and they're it's just they're playing Donna Summer and disco music, and there's a lack of hostility in Dallas. It's a show, man. If people get dressed up, it's fancy. It's not like Levi's where people are throwing hands. It sure as hell ain't the LA Coliseum where I literally one time took out a bottle and urinated in my seat in a bottle so I wouldn't have to cross over 3 gangs to get at the LA Coliseum. There's 100 seats per section. Our seat was 52 and 53. We're in the end zone for Raiders Chiefs in 1990. I have to go to the bathroom so bad. I've drank so many beers. I literally whipped it out and urinated in a bottle in my seat because instead of crossing over 3 rival gangs. I mean, that was a scary moment.
That's awesome.
I'm telling you. It takes a lot of hand-eye coordination, by the way. Okay, but Dallas fans are so polite. They're so ridiculously polite. I mean, it was almost shocking. I was like, "Do you guys have anybody here who wants to mix it up?" Like, "Oh, y'all y'all Niner fans, get out of here." I mean, it was like literally. I mean, a couple people threw peanuts at me, and that was it. I mean, if that was LA Coliseum, I would have died right then and there. There'd be no Kev. All right. Couple last ones. Artur, and I'm not joking about the urination sensation. Artur Gazarian says, Larry, the king of uncomfortable moments. The elevator time with Trent Baalke, and now walking in on Harbaugh. Larry's lazy when it comes to making already miserable people feel worse. Way to go, Larry. Joking. Love your stories. I'm just so damn old that I've got so many stories. And then this one, Dazzy, who's emptying the clip, says, if you could have one player from the Harbaugh era on the current team, who would you take? I would take right now to this team, because it's always about complimenting the team you got. If I could add one player from the Harbaugh team to this team, give me Aldon Smith in his prime opposite Nick Bosa, and I'm good to go. I'm absolutely good to go.
That's the no-brainer answer that I would take. Just an out-of-the-box answer, if we're looking at this team, I would take 2011 Carlos Rogers, how he played in 2011 outside and inside, and stick him on this team. But that's if we're not going to take, Bowman and Willis because they have Warner and Greenlaw. We're not taking Justin Smith. But I think Aldon Smith is the most obvious pick, Krueg. I think you're absolutely right. That's at the end of the day, yeah.
Who would you guys go with? Somebody says Mike Iupati here. We got this one from Isaac. He says Mike Iupati. Mitchell Ness is Bowman.
I don't know if I would take Iupati, but I probably would take somebody from that offensive line. I mean,
oof.
You're not taking Big John Goodwin? Probably Anthony center? Davis? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd probably take Anthony Davis would probably be it. Yeah. I mean, if you had Anthony Davis, you would shore up. This offensive line would be, no weakness, right?
Yeah, it would. I mean, if they can keep his weight down, right? That's always a question.
Somebody said fish and chips, Andy Lee.
Not a bad option.
Joe Latou says Joe Staley. What Joe Staley? What the fuck?
Can he play right tackle though?
I take my chances with him. Hey,
I take my chances with Aldon Smith, man.
Larry's tripping.
Right.
Larry's tripping again. Tripping.
The problem with Alden is like you don't know like what Alden you're gonna get though. You know, if you throw him out there, it's like, is he gonna go on a bender and not play and get suspended? Like that's the hard part.
Fair enough on if he gets suspended, but to be fair, when he does go on the bender, when he got cut, I heard from a player on the 2015 team. So he got cut in 2015. He was drafted in 2015. When they drafted him, he didn't like know that Joe Staley was this fantastic tackle because they used to have to sit Aldon Smith on the side of practice so that they could practice plays on offense. He was that dominant, and he got cut like a week into camp. So imagine the kind of impression that he made.
Tell you the guy I'm not taking. I'm not taking Chris Culliver. Do you guys remember Chris Culliver?
I remember his comments during Super Bowl week. They should have given Alex Smith a podium instead of him.
Right. That's right. I forgot about that. All right, guys. Good stream. On the way out the door, I talked and picked all the topics. You guys didn't pick any of the topics. Is there some minor topic that we could spend 3 to 5 minutes on to finish up here that I didn't cover that you guys would like to at least mention? I mean, we didn't mention anything at all about the fact that Jake Moody is not, it may be they go with this other kicker this weekend or next weekend against Pittsburgh. I think that's very likely. They signed. It was interesting. They signed Matthew Wright. He was an undrafted free agent in 2019. He played at Central Florida. They signed him to the practice squad. He kicked for the Steelers, Jaguars, and Chiefs. He's 40 for 46 career, 11 for 14 from 40 to 49, 6 of 8 from 50 plus. He's 35 or 37 on PATs. But you know what? A lot of people say Heinz Field, or whatever they're calling it these days, is one of the NFL's toughest stadiums to kick at. I actually might want to go with Matthew Wright over Jake Moody against the Steelers just because he has experience kicking in that stadium. I like the idea of guys against their former team. What do you think? I mean, would you say, hey, Jake, you're our guy, but let's start in week 2 and go with Matthew Wright off the practice squad? Or would you go with the rookie on the road at Heinz in week 1? This could mean the difference between winning and losing, and it could be the difference between home field advantage and not. I mean, not to blow it into more than what it is, but it could be.
I don't feel good about any of those kickers. Like, can we get Crosby or Gold? Is that just out of the question completely? I don't know, man. Oh, I feel like if Moody's healthy, you have to go with him. I mean, you're talking about a position that relies on confidence, and if you say, "Hey, you're healthy," and we're gonna not play you, I don't know what that does for his confidence. And then, go out week 2, we believe in you all of a sudden. I don't know if that's the route I would take. So, if I'm forced to choose between these two, I would go with Moody, but I mean, I don't feel very good about the kicker spot at all. And somebody said that Larry's being selfish choosing all the topics. That's kind of the way that we do it. If it's on your channel, you choose the topics. So whatever we talk about on Vish's channel, he's come up with the topics. If it's Larry's channel, he comes up with the topics. And if it's on my channel, I come up with the topics.
How dare you question me picking the topics, chat?
Not to mention, he had like 9 different topics that he told us before the show. And we've gone 2 hours and 17 minutes, and we've covered 4 of them.
I know,
right.
I know. And 69er says, what about Sean Hill? LOL. And then we got this one from Fish and Chips. The money keeps rolling in. What is that, Jesse? What is that? That's not $2. What is that?
£2.
Euros?
£2. Yeah. All right. Minor topic, random tush push ruination of the game.
Oh, yeah. I agree.
He's talking about
he's talking about that stupid Jalen Hurts play where they just
the Eagles.
Shove him. Yeah.
The rugby scrum.
The
rugby scrum.
Yeah. I'm with them.
Okay. Do you guys have any last topic that I didn't hit that you guys would like to hit? And as you're thinking about that, let me just do one thing here because I want to promote this, but I also want to play this for you guys because I think this was cool. It's not every day that I get a chance to interview Joe Montana. Today I did. So I'm going to let you guys hear the question that I asked him, and here it is. Joe, let's talk a little bit about Brock. a lot of things that he does well. I mean, he processes well. He throws with timing. He throws with accuracy. A lot of the same things that you did. Do you people have compared him, and obviously that could be a burden because of how great of a player you were. But do you see any similarities in the two in your game compared to his? And what do you think of Purdy so far?
Well, I never really try to compare, one quarterback to another because the styles are all different.
Sure.
But the one thing you can look at are the things that you said that, he processes quickly, ball comes out of his hand quickly, he makes good decisions, and he throws accurately. And you can't ask more of a quarterback. And as you can see, that system fits him and his style because he plugged in pretty quickly there. I mean, to come in from where he was and be thrown into that game, hey, my hat's off to him. I look forward to seeing him play. He's exciting, and he's got a pretty good team with him, and that always helps out a quarterback anytime when you got some weapons like they do.
Joe, let's talk. There you go. That was a great thrill, man, getting a chance to interview the great Joe Montana. I was 11 years old, cool, guys, when he won the Super Bowl in 1981, and getting a chance later in life to interview him a few times. It's it's just not. It's. I don't get too excited, or I never get nervous on the radio or on this show, but I do get excited sometimes when I get to do certain things that are super cool. And when I filled in today on the 95.7 The Game morning show, the program director called me last week. He's like, "Hey, by the way, you're gonna have Joe Montana on with you." I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, he's got this whiskey that he's promoting and this and that. He's doing a media tour, and it just happens to be the day you're filling in." And I'm like, "Awesome, I'll be ready." So thanks to Matt Nahagian, and thanks to all the people at 95.7 The Game for giving me an opportunity to interview my hero, my childhood hero today. What'd you think of what Joe said there, though?
It doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, Brock he has a lot of the same qualities that Joe had from a mental capacity standpoint. I think both of them are very mentally strong. I think both of them relied on accuracy and precision, and both of them were actually pretty damn athletic. So I think that I think Joe, it's interesting because Joe definitely has an ego. And when he's like, well, I don't compare quarterbacks. What he means is I'm not comparing anybody to me because I'm the greatest is what he's thinking. But he definitely respects Brock's game. He sees a lot, I'm sure, of his game in Brock. And, if that's what you're looking for, then yeah, I mean, he does. There's a lot of similarities there. So I completely understand where he's coming from.
Yeah, I had similar thoughts. I thought what he said about Purdy from evaluation standpoint was completely fair, and I also like that he took the comparison out of it. It puts an unnecessary pressure on a player, and it also creates unnecessary expectations, and people will run with those quotes and all of that. And so I will say one of my most frustrating points when great players talk about stuff in the media, and I'll even equate this to Steve Young, is they often go back to their career and their personal experiences, which is great. But often when you're giving everything of your analysis as something anecdotal, it's tough to look at because at the end of the day, you're one of the greatest players ever. That's not something that applies for the average player. And I liked that he talked about Brock Purdy for his situation here, rather going back to what Bill used to say or what Mike Holmgren used to tell him and what that meant about his career and all of that. I like this answer a lot. Great question, Krug.
And two last ones, and then we'll bolt for the door. One last super. Iceman says, Larry, the food show you were talking about earlier was Robert Irvine, Restaurant Impossible. Also, don't forget Delaney Walker was a Swiss Army knife. Thank you. And you're right.
That's a good one.
Robert Irvine, he's got the sun's out, guns out. The guy's ridiculously buffed. It's like, what the heck? And then this one, Tyler Tharp, he says, over an hour, fellas, and I'm still here. Great content is why, but Krug straight up called Cowboy fans pussies, and I totally love it. Thank you. I'll be here.
I didn't expect you to go straight and hit the word, Krug. I'm not going to lie.
Well, what the heck? It's my show. If YouTube wants to cancel me, they can cancel me. I've already told a true story about whipping it out and urinating in a jar or in a bottle. So there you go. And if you were sitting in front of me that day, I'm sorry for the residual spray. All right. That is going to do it for us. And By the way, I just got to say, I love this Thursday night show because I love both these guys. These guys do an incredible job. Vish and I have been streaming for almost a whole year now, doing incredible stuff. The three of us have gotten together in the last, Jessie and I kind of discovered Jessie through Grant. His channel, and I love Jesse's content. And we've been streaming as a trio here for the last, whatever it's been, 5, 6, 7 weeks, and I love it. I look forward to it. It's literally my favorite show of the week. I'm calling it the Big Show. I've got high school buddies that say, "Man, I love your Thursday night show, bro." So I appreciate you guys greatly. Tease whatever you guys got cooking in here in the next couple of days. I know you guys do lots of streams and partnerships and co-streams with other people. What do you got cooking the next couple of days on your channel that you would like to promote?
Go ahead, Vish.
I don't got much, dude. I'm waiting for week 1. I probably won't be streaming, honestly, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. I'm going to a wedding. I'm be enjoying myself this weekend. But I'll be back Monday, and I can't wait for us to stream next week, coinciding at the same time with the start of week 1. It's going to be electric. I look forward to being there.
Who is the week 1?
Sports. Tune in. It's the Lions Chiefs. So we'll be
Lions Chiefs. I took Jahmyr Gibbs high up in the fantasy draft, so I'll be watching that one.
What round?
And I took Mahomes. I went. This is what I went with. Tell me what you guys think of this. I went round 1, Garrett Wilson. Came back in round 2 with Patrick Mahomes, Jahmyr Gibbs in round 3, then Dameon Pierce, Isaiah Pacheco, Jordan Addison, Pat Freiermuth, Elijah Moore, Kenneth Gainwell, Nico Collins, Darnell Mooney, Tyjae Spears, Chris Rodriguez in the 13th round. That's the Washington third-string running back. Isaiah Hodgins, Justin Ross, Greg Zuerlein's my kicker, and I went Chargers defense because it was the last.
How many team league is this?
It's a 14 team.
Yeah, I was going to say, this doesn't sound like a 12-team league to me. This sounds like a 14 or 16. Yeah.
Either I'm a shitty drafter.
Saying, don't get me started. He did not like your draft.
Yeah,
Kevin hates
for 14. No, for a 14 team, I do. I was like, "There's no way this is a 12-team league. Otherwise, you're getting
Garrett
taxed."
Wilson in the first round in 12 or 10, man. I'd be like, "You're wild." But I'm a fantasy hater, Krueg. So
my 14-year-old says, "Dad, you suck at fantasy," and just to prove that he's probably right, Yahoo gave me a D+. A D+ for my draft.
I don't trust those rankings either. No. I wouldn't trust that. We'll see. I mean, 14-team league changes the whole game. That's a lot league. Different.
I know, seriously.
Is it you and the radio guys, you and the high school buddies? What's going on here?
No, it was 95-7 the game. And we had to pause the draft at 1 point for like 12 minutes, and I just tortured these guys with all kinds of vitriol in the chat, with just ripping these guys to shreds. And I'm like, wait, if you're going to make me wait at my computer for 12 minutes as you guys figure out how to log back on, I'm going to just sit here and rip. So it was a fun night. Jessie, what do you got cooking? I know you got a bunch of things going on your channel. Yeah. What day do you go with Grant? Is it Monday?
Grant is Wednesday. It's over on his channel. But next week we got a full deck, man. One thing I just dropped before we came over here was like a tribute to like Steve Young on my channel. Broke down his career, his rise to stardom, my favorite player of all time. So that was actually a fun little project I was working on for a big chunk of today, and dropped that for the weekend. So you can go check it out. But what's coming up, man, a lot next week. However, I'll say this. One of the most popular shows that came out of last year was Behind Enemy Lines. Wednesday night, if you tap into anything, that's what I would tap into. It's where I have a content creator on from the opposing team, and we talk about the matchup. If you want to know anything about the enemy and you want to know what's about to go down on Sunday, definitely tap into Behind Enemy Lines. You are going to learn a lot about opposing teams from other content creators that really know their stuff. So looking forward to this season, looking forward to our stream Thursday as well. And definitely looking forward to Behind Enemy Lines each week and learning about the opposing team coming up.
What time again on the enemy line? Behind Enemy Lines?
Yeah, it will be on around either 10:15 or 10:30, depending on when I close out with Grant.
Eastern.
Eastern time, yes.
Give us the Central time, just
So, well, either 9:15 or 9:30. Mountain, we're going to be at 8:15, 8:30, and Pacific time at 7:15 or 7:30. Just depends.
Yeah. Well, okay. Let me just do one last mention of the sponsors, and then I'll hit the exit hatch on this thing. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle, the title sponsor of the Krueg Show. They just re-upped with us for another 6 months. I'll be there tomorrow at 12:30 having lunch. If you want to stop by and assassinate me, stop by. It's going to be I'm really looking forward to the NFL season starting, but thanks to Pig and a Pickle, thanks to New York Style Sausage Company, thanks to Marin Auto Glass, marinautoglass.com. Give them a call, 415-883-3030. Did I ever tell you the story how my windshield was shot out with bullets? That's for next week.
You did.
I have told it. And check out our new sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Click the link in the description, and you can sign up using the promo code Krueg, Krueg, and they'll match your first deposit up to $100. We'll be using Underdog Fantasy every week this football season to do fantasy tournaments with our listeners. We'll have more details on that forthcoming. Gentlemen, outstanding stuff. 2 hours, exactly 2.5 hours. Thanks to Jessie. Thanks to Vish. Thanks to all of you for the supers. Peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you won't get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you bring me, getting handled. I answer.